Chapter 3605. Alright, let's do as Taoist Yuan Qing says. Xiaohua nodded. He looked very relaxed as if he was about to swat a mosquito. Taoist Yuan Qing wasn't as calm as Xiaohua. He had heard of Fairy Xiangfeng's fame and felt that Xiaohua was underestimating Taoist Xiang Tian. He wanted to say a few more words, but when he saw that Taoist Xiang Tian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator were about to approach, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly moved his halberd and chased after Taoist Xiang Tian. When Taoist Yuan Qing chased after him, there was a strange look in his eyes. However, Taoist Yuan Qing's figure had only moved a few hundred meters when suddenly, the sound of a pipa appeared in the air. This pipa sound was very strange. It was low and deep like raindrops, falling directly into people's hearts. Soon after, the raindrops became as big as a bucket and continued to crackle. After a few breaths of time, the pipa sound suddenly became louder. It was like an eagle striking the sky, producing the sound of a golden spear. Not good. The defensive formation has been activated. Not only Xiaohua, but all the cultivators within a few dozen kilometers were awakened by the sound of the battle. Xiaohua was especially shocked. The true qi in his chest was stirred up by the unspeakable pipa sound. In a trance, he seemed to see iron horses roaring from the ice river. The iron horses' hooves instantly crushed the space. Golden spear iron horse? Xiaohua calmed down and immediately stabilized his true qi. He couldn't help but think of Leng Qingge's golden spear iron horse formation. Sure enough, as the sound of the pipa reverberated through the entire space, a vast amount of awe-inspiring qi rushed into the cold pond and the ice river. Countless battle-intense and cold air rushed out from the ice river. Waves of inscriptions stirred in the ice river and the cold pond. Then, pairs of war horses rushed out from the ice river and the cold pond. See! Xiaohua, who had seen the 5 brocade cloud painting before, couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when his divine sense swept across these war horses. These war horses that were formed from ice were all soldiers and generals wearing ice armor. These soldiers and generals were surrounded by an incomparably noble and cold aura. Furthermore, the weapons in their hands seemed to be both tangible and intangible at the same time. The aura of these war horses was several times stronger than Leng Qingge's golden spear iron horse formation. Moreover, there was an endless stream of cavalry emerging from the ice river. There seemed to be no end to it. Oh no! Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't help but worry for those golden core cultivators. 1 or 2 battle riders might not be able to catch the eye of a gold core cultivator, but 100 or 1,000 of them could definitely take the life of a gold core cultivator, not to mention that many of these gold core cultivators were still resisting the heavenly might of the defensive formation. Xiaohua's worries were not superfluous. Not far from where Xiaohua's divine sense swept past, a Jindan cultivator who was doing his utmost to resist the heavenly might of the imperial formation saw several armored horses galloping on the ice river approaching. Immediately his entire body flashed with a splendor, and a magic weapon that looked like a silver moon spat out from his mouth. The silver moon was like a blade, and when the splendor flew past, those armored horses were instantly shattered into pieces. The charging horses turned into ice and fell to the ground. However, without waiting for this gold core cultivator to catch his breath, another dozen or so ice spears emerged from the cold pond. Before he could even see the armored horses behind the ice spears, those ice spears shot towards the gold core cultivator like meteors. The gold core cultivator's figure slightly swayed, as if his pressure was shaken by the heavenly might of the formation. Soon after, his head also shook, and it seemed as if countless armored horses had appeared before his eyes. When the ice spears approached him, that cultivator let out a loud roar. The silver moon magic weapon flashed again, and the dozen or so ice spears were easily destroyed. Even when the magic weapon rushed into the ice river, it brought with it 10,000 drops of frost, and the armored horses that were unable to charge out were also destroyed in one strike. The gold core cultivator caught his breath, and thick clouds immediately appeared beneath his feet. The clouds carried the cultivator's body and flew straight into the air. However, after flying for several meters, whoosh! Several ice spears shot out from the thick clouds beneath his feet. They very strangely stabbed towards the gold core cultivator's lower body. The gold core cultivator turned pale with fright. Only now did he understand that these weapons and armored horses could be produced from any kind of fog. Even his magic cloud technique was not spared. Fortunately, this gold core cultivator was alert enough. He had already realized that something was wrong. He hurriedly turned his body into the wind and used the Dao Sec's flying technique to hastily dodge. Poo piu piu. Several muffled sounds rang out. Several spears were shattered, and the gold core cultivator was also pierced by 2 of the ice spears. However, the gold core cultivator's body shone with golden light. The ice spears only managed to pierce his defensive magic weapon, and they were broken again. Just as this gold core cultivator was still in shock, and his heart had just started to feel lucky, a clump of cold air once again strangely appeared a few feet in front of his head. This time, the gold core cultivator was prepared. He looked very calm. With a wave of his big sleeve, kacha-kacha, sounds rang out. Several Dao weapons broke on his iron-like Dao robe. Of course, there were still several ice spears that managed to slip through the net and hide outside of these relatively powerful divine abilities. The gold core cultivator's body shone with golden light again. Clearly, he wanted to block these ice spears. However, when the ice spears pierced the golden light, the gold core cultivator's complexion changed greatly. Without waiting for him to stir up his true essence again, or activate his silver moon magic weapon, one of the ice spears pierced his chest. The gold core cultivator let out a blood-curdling scream. His corporeal body floated down like a withered leaf. The ice spear that sneak attacked him just now, like the other spears and halberds, sank into the cold air and disappeared without a trace. In just a short moment, the gold core cultivator controlling the formation was suppressed, his soul suppressed, his spirit attacked, and his life was taken away. The hundreds of years of hard work he had put into cultivating turned into flowing water. A strand of wandering soul calmly disappeared. Hiss! Xiaohua could clearly see from high up in the sky that the killing ice spear was no different from the other ice spears. His divine sense was unable to distinguish it at all. Seeing the gold core cultivator fall so easily, Xiaohua hastily opened his transcendence vision. With one glance, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because within the countless mist, there were actually many immortal weapons wielding ice spears that would occasionally appear from the fog of the defensive formation. After killing a gold core cultivator with one strike, they would immediately disappear into the formation. It was as if they were dragging mud and water. It was truly incomparably mysterious. Within this defensive formation, more than half of the gold core cultivators had already fallen in a short moment. The other gold core cultivators saw that the situation was far from good and hurriedly protected themselves with all their might. At the same time, they also used Dao sect flying techniques to get closer to Taoist Master Xiangtian and the other nascent soul cultivators, hoping to use this opportunity to escape. As for Taoist Master Xiangtian, how could he care about these gold core cultivators? Taoist Master Xiangtian's magic power surged all over his body and sword light shot out, sweeping everything in its path. All the ice spears and iron horses were cut down and unparalleled momentum rushed towards the treasure. At this moment, the nascent soul cultivators in the distance also felt Taoist Master Xiangtian's killing intent. They sped up, wanting to snatch the jade box before Taoist Master Xiangtian could. Of course, they didn't care about the sneak attacks of the immortal weapons around them. Damn it! Xiaohua was inwardly annoyed by the ruthless methods of this Confucian cultivator. He cursed and urged his body to catch up to Taoist Master Yuanqing. Xiaohua's speed was naturally far superior to Taoist Master Yuanqing's. Although he didn't use the lightning escape technique, he had already surpassed Taoist Master Yuanqing in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Yuanqing was stunned, but a smile appeared on his face. The stronger Xiaohua was, the better it would be for him. The two of them would have more chances to kill Taoist Master Xiangtian if they joined hands. However, Taoist Master Yuanqing was puzzled because after Xiaohua passed him, he didn't directly attack Taoist Master Xiangtian. He also didn't try to snatch the treasure. Instead, he flew down between him and Taoist Master Xiangtian. Xiaohua waved his hands and shot out a series of incantations. The space within 1,000 feet of Taoist Master Yuan Qing began to tremble rapidly. Strands of cold air were shattered and the pillars of Taoist Master Yuan Qing's qi were also destroyed. A golden light flashed and half of the golden scissors rushed into the air. Ah! Miserable screams sounded and several broken limbs wearing immortal armor fell into the fog in the distance. Too fierce. Taoist Master Yuan Qing was flabbergasted. As the saying goes, when an expert shows his hand, you can tell whether he is an expert or not. Although this saying was very vulgar, it was very appropriate to use it on Xiaohua. Taoist Master Yuan Qing had overestimated Xiaohua, but that overestimation was far from Xiaohua's fierceness. Taoist Master Yuan Qing was well aware of the limitations the defensive formation had on Tao sect cultivators. He could easily cast the confinement of 1,000 feet outside the Yaodai Mountain, but inside the defensive formation, it was already a miracle that he was able to confine a few thousand feet. Otherwise, he wouldn't have desperately chased after Taoist Master Xiangtian, and Taoist Master Xiangtian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator wouldn't have had to desperately rush to the cliff where the treasure was. Normally, a nascent soul cultivator would be able to snatch the treasure within a dozen or so miles. Even if they used a flying technique, they would be able to snatch it in the blink of an eye. Taoist Master Yuan Qing was pleasantly surprised and his expression changed once again. The magic power in Xiaohua's body surged and the safe area that Xiaohua's magic power restricted was constantly expanding. The golden core cultivator next to the immortal soldier who had just been killed was already at the edge of the safe area. It wasn't until now that Taoist Master Yuan Qing realized what Xiaohua was thinking. He really didn't understand. After all, that golden core cultivator wasn't Wu Tian or Chang Yu. Of course, Xiaohua's actions only made Taoist Master Yuan Qing respect him and trust him even more. He only urged his magic power to chase after Taoist Master Xiangtian, who was already close to the treasure. He didn't believe that Xiaohua, who could save an ordinary golden core cultivator, wouldn't forget about him, a nascent soul cultivator that he had befriended. Rumble! At that moment, Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure collided. Countless waves of qi surged out, and the fog that had been dispersed by the pillars of qi began to wreak havoc once again. Although the defensive formation borrowed the power of the heavens and was extremely powerful, the collision between two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators still caused the formation to shake a few times. The dozens of pillars of qi were once again shattered. Not good. Perhaps the bystanders were surprised by the fierceness of the battle between the two nascent soul cultivators, but Xiaohua inwardly cursed, because as the defensive formation trembled, even more cold air and armored horses were born from the void. The few Jindan cultivators who were lucky enough to survive had just seen the dawn of life, but in a short moment, they were submerged by these armored horses. The battle between two nascent soul cultivators had indirectly taken the lives of several golden core cultivators. Chapter 3606. Seeing this, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. During the trip to Yaodai Mountain, Li Xiang had made it clear that they had to hide their strength and keep a low profile. Although Li Xiang might not have seen the immortal weapons hidden in the fog, he also knew that the Confucian cultivators would not easily let the Taoist cultivators go. Xiaohua rashly wanted to save these Jindan cultivators and display his superhuman skills, but at this time, he really did not have the strength to do so. Several Jindan cultivators were scattered around the Great Formation. He had only used the soaring dragon shears to kill a dozen immortal weapons. Just as he was about to use his Yuanying hand to cover the nearest Jindan cultivator, there was a sound of surging waves. Countless ice currents flashing with an extremely cold aura appeared all around the Great Formation. One by one, ice cavalrymen, several zhang tall, strangely protruded from the ice currents. Streams of vast qi once again rumbled and poured into these ice cavalrymen. Streaks of azure light seeped out from these ice cavalrymen. The azure dragon saber that they wielded was more powerful than any magic tool. Cracks appeared in the void as it flashed out. Even the magic treasures of Jindan cultivators could not achieve such an effect. The Confucian cultivators had gradually released their means. When these ice cavalrymen appeared, the Jindan cultivators were all greatly shocked. Their faces were ashen, and their hearts were filled with despair. Previously, the iron glacier armor had already beaten them to a pulp. Now, the ice cavalrymen were several times more powerful than the iron glacier armor. The Jindan cultivator's fighting spirit was completely gone, especially the Jindan cultivator near Xiaohua's confinement area. He completely gave up resisting and only wanted to be protected by Xiaohua. After Xiaohua used the soaring dragon shears to kill a dozen ice cavalrymen, he really could no longer take care of this cultivator who had lost all fighting spirit. The ice cavalryman suddenly thrust forward, and an ice spear that was 100 times colder than ice pierced deeply into his back. Even the Jindan cultivator who was about to self-destruct was suppressed by this coldness. His entire body turned into an ice sculpture and fell to the ground. Not only that, but these cold currents that were like the eruption of an icy river instantly appeared everywhere within the imperial formation that spanned dozens of kilometers. Ice spears that were comparable to Jindan stage cultivators strangely appeared from the void. Even within the space that Xiaohua had just sealed, the powerful imperial formation's heavenly might tore apart the restriction inch by inch. At the places where the restriction was torn apart, strands of icy currents appeared like blood clots. Hundreds of ice spears appeared along with the appearance of the ice cavalry, and each ice spear stabbed toward Xiaohua like flying swords. Xiaohua had no time to care about himself, let alone the several Jindan stage cultivators. After the ice spear appeared, they all died in the time it took to drink a cup of tea. Reverend Xiang Tian and the nameless Yuaning, who were charging towards the ancient treasure, were surrounded by ice cavalry just like Xiaohua. These ice cavalry blocked their path, and even with all sorts of divine abilities, they were unable to kill these ice cavalry. Xiaohua naturally had to resort to trickery. Although the Dharma eye between his eyebrows was not particularly obvious, it was still slightly open. After all, Confucian cultivators were very proficient in using deception tactics, so Xiaohua naturally could not be careless. Sure enough, after a dozen ice cavalry arrived, an immortal general that was several times stronger than the ice cavalry rushed out of the icy water with an ice cavalry in his hand. With a whistle, he stabbed toward Xiaohua like the other ice cavalry. Unfortunately, although this immortal general did not show his face, his filthy thoughts could not be exposed to the light of day. Xiaohua also did not seem to notice. He casually waved his Taoist robe and scattered most of the ice spears. A few ice cavalry powerlessly pierced the golden light protecting Xiaohua's body. Seeing the ice spears pierce Xiaohua's armpits, the immortal general raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he was happy. Unfortunately, his eyebrows seemed to have stopped there and could no longer be raised. At this moment, Xiaohua suddenly shook his hand and a wishful staff appeared in his hand. The wishful staff whistled through the air, flashing past the ice spears and smashing into the immortal general's head. The immortal general did not understand how he had died under Xiaohua's hands. The staff was too strange. No one would have imagined it. When Xiaohua encountered such an obstruction, there was no need to mention Taoist Xiangtian, Taoist Yuanqing, and the nameless nascent soul cultivator. There were even more cold currents near the strange treasure. Before Taoist Yuanqing could catch up to Taoist Xiangtian, he was blocked by many ice cavalry and had no choice but to use his small halberd to meet them. The ice cavalry and ice spears might be the appetizer for these nascent soul cultivators, but the immortal general hidden among the ice cavalry was the appetizer. Several times, the three nascent soul cultivators were almost stabbed by the immortal general. How could the three nascent soul cultivators not know that something was wrong? Reverend Xiangtian hurriedly slapped his hand on the door above him, causing a cluster of green light to shoot up into the air. The green light transformed into countless sword lights that rained down like a fountain, enveloping the space several hundred feet around Reverend Xiangtian. These sword lights were filled with sword shadows and chilling intent. They strangled the ice river and frost inch by inch, not allowing the ice cavalry to appear again. Reverend Xiangtian did the same. Reverend Yuanqing and the nameless nascent soul cultivator did the same. One of them unleashed a watercolored light that looked like a boat in the ocean to protect himself, while the other condensed a huge spindle-shaped magic treasure to shield himself. Neither the ice spears nor the cavalry could break through their defense. Seeing the few gold core cultivators inside the defensive formation fall into the ice river one after another, Xiao Hua sighed and withdrew his magic power. He used his divine sense to urge the soaring dragon shears to sweep away the ice spears and ice cavalry that came out of the ice river. The wishful staff in his hand also danced and flew toward Taoist Xiangtian and the others. For a moment, the entire defensive formation was in a stalemate with the 4 nascent soul cultivators. Although there were still dozens of ice rivers within the defensive formation, the ice rivers seemed to be helpless against the defenses of the 4 nascent soul cultivators. Seeing that the previous defense was effective, Taoist Xiangtian immediately urged his flying sword to rush toward the treasure while the nameless nascent soul cultivator used his nascent soul hand to grab the treasure. Seeing this, Taoist Master Yuan Qing knew that this was an excellent opportunity. Almost without hesitation, he activated the small halberd. Streaks of crystalline thunderbolts flashed in the air, shattering countless ice spears. Like the nameless nascent soul attacking Taoist Master Xiangtian from both sides, the halberd fell towards Taoist Master Xiangtian's back. "You dare!" Taoist Xiangtian coldly smiled and pointed his finger at the flying sword. The flying sword let out a whistling sound and instantly grew in size. It was originally flying toward the treasure, but it strangely changed direction and directly chopped toward the nameless nascent soul's nascent soul hand. Moreover, the momentum of this change was as heavy as a mountain, as if Taoist Xiangtian had already planned for this. The nameless nascent soul's expression changed slightly. He knew that this was a diversion tactic, but at this point, the nameless nascent soul had no choice but to face it head-on. Looking at the smug expression on Reverend Xiang Tian's face, he opened his mouth slightly. Web. He spat out a mouthful of clear air, and a cauldron the size of a thumb flew into the air. Following his chanting, a dozen huge pillars of origin energy rose from the mouth of the cauldron and landed on the cauldron with a sound no less powerful than that of the pillars of origin energy. Pung. After the cauldron received the origin energy pillars, it shined brightly like a meteor and blocked the small halberd that was about to transform into a dragon. Rumble. In an instant, Taoist Xiangtian used his flying sword to split open the nameless nascent soul's nascent soul hand and the cauldron to block Taoist Yuan Qing's small halberd magic treasure. With a loud sound, the entire defensive formation violently trembled. Whether it was the ice river or the mist, they were all violently tumbling, causing Taoist Yuan Qing to feel extremely bitter. Although he had overestimated Taoist Xiangtian, this overestimation was not enough. They were both mid-stage nascent soul cultivators, but Taoist Xiangtian was able to fight against 2 of them with ease. Taoist Yuan Qing didn't know what the nameless nascent soul cultivator was feeling. He only knew that his qi and blood were surging and the magic power in his body was tumbling like the ice river. A sharp sound seemed to be coming from his ears. Along with this sound, the sound of the pipa in the defensive formation reached its peak and soared into the sky. I can't let Taoist Xiangtian and that nameless nascent soul cultivator join forces. I must join forces with Xiao Hua to kill Taoist Xiangtian. This was the only thought in Taoist Yuan Qing's mind. At the same time, he didn't care too much. While urging his magic power, his halberd flashed with an unusually strong brilliance. He desperately rushed towards Taoist Xiangtian's cauldron. At the same time, he transmitted his voice to Xiao Hua, preparing to join forces with them to attack. However, the mist and ice river in the defensive formation were tumbling madly. The sound was loud and chaotic, and the noble qi was like a giant python that was slithering chaotically. Taoist Yuan Qing was unable to transmit his voice. Oh no! Taoist Yuan Qing's heart suddenly shuddered and he had an ominous feeling. As soon as this feeling appeared, the entire defensive formation suddenly fell silent. All the sounds of the pipa, the river of ice, and the roaring of the vast pillar of qi strangely disappeared, like the waning of the night. In this moment of extreme silence, Taoist Xiangtian's cold plum blossom flying sword rushed out of the ice river and once again turned into a big plum blossom hand to grab the strange treasure on the cliff. Damn it! The big hand only rose a few feet, but Xiao Hua's angry voice was heard. The entire defensive formation was filled with the sound of thunder. Xiaohua turned into a bolt of lightning and streaked across the sky, pouncing towards Taoist Xiangtian's big plum blossom hand to stop him. Woo! In the midst of the thunder, a wisp of flute sound came from an unknown place. Although it was clear, it was extremely penetrating, and Xiaohua's thunder was unable to cover it. Along with this flute sound, the entire defensive formation was suddenly filled with a burst of weak wind from all over. When Taoist Xiangtian saw Xiaohua using the thunder escape technique, he was shocked. He pointed his finger at the cauldron and dodged Taoist Yuanqing's halberd, which suddenly grew several times larger and fell towards Xiaohua's head. Although Xiaohua's thunder escape technique was extremely fast, the cauldron produced a huge suction force, and he had to pass through it. Xiaohua sneered and waved the wishful staff in his hand. In the eyes of Taoist Xiangtian, the wishful staff inconceivably grew longer and bigger and hit the cauldron. The cauldron was no longer under Taoist Xiangtian's control and began to tumble in the air. Chapter 3608. Taoist Xiangtian. Xiaohua waved the wishful staff and shouted angrily, "Can't you see? Every time you fight someone, you cause a change in the defensive formation, and each change is stronger than the last. You've already caused more than 10 golden core cultivators to die in the defensive formation. Do you want to drag us down with you?" Xiaohua's voice was extremely loud. It sounded like a thunderclap inside the defensive formation. When Reverend Yuanqing heard it, he couldn't help but feel shaken. He was immediately stunned. How could this Xiaohua possibly speak inside the defensive formation? Taoist Xiao. Taoist Yuanqing hastily said, but as he thought, even though his voice contained magic power, it still couldn't reach far. It was at this moment that the flute sound in the defense formations suddenly became sharp. The weak wind that was generated earlier suddenly intensified. The weak wind was more powerful than any magic weapon. When it blew on immortal Yuanqing's body, the golden light that protected his body was extinguished in a visible manner. Not only that, but the light on Minghao's halberd was also flickering rapidly. A feeling of friction between the halberd and the sand was transmitted from Minghao's halberd. Even the magic treasure couldn't withstand the weak wind of the defensive array. Not good. Taoist Yuanqing's expression changed and he opened his mouth. A blue bead rushed into the air, and a watery brilliance fell, completely covering Taoist Yuanqing. In the weak wind, a string of small bubbles appeared on the surface of the light. The bubbles popped and popped like boiling water. Even though the water bead couldn't completely resist the weak wind, Taoist Yuanqing let out a long sigh of relief. He reached out to grab Minghao's halberd, but when he tried to use his magic power, the weak wind blocked his magic power. Minghao's halberd flashed a few times, and like a wanderer unwilling to turn back, it only struggled to return several feet. Taoist Yuanqing had no choice but to use his flying light to fly in the direction of Minghao's halberd. At this moment, the expressions of Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless cultivator changed slightly. Reverend Xiangtian was shocked by Xiaohua's divine ability and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. In the end, Reverend Xiangtian didn't dare to act rashly and recalled the cold plum blossom flying sword and the cauldron. In just a moment, half of the cold plum blossom flying sword had been blown away by the wind, causing Reverend Xiangtian to be shocked. The nameless cultivator seemed to have been prepared for this. Seeing his magic weapon being corroded by the weak wind, he didn't seem surprised, but when he heard Xiaohua's voice, he was greatly alarmed. He opened his mouth and a pale white bead flew into the air. The bead's brilliance didn't cover a large area, only a few dozen feet in size, but within this area, not a single weak wind could be produced. Air-frozen bead? Reverend Xiangtian's eyes lit up. The flying sword seemed to be greedy, and it shrank a few times in the air before returning to his hand. This was because at this moment, Xiaohua, who Reverend Xiangtian was most unsure of, had arrived. Although the golden light around Xiaohua's body flickered slightly in the wind, as if it was being eroded by the wind, Xiaohua's flying speed was much faster than before. Although it couldn't compare to the lightning evasion technique, in the eyes of Reverend Xiangtian, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. After all, Xiaohua was his enemy and not his friend. All of you stop. After several changes in the defensive formation, Xiaohua was finally able to say these words in front of the two mid-nascent soul stage cultivators. If anyone dares to act rashly again, this Xiao will immediately kill them. With that, Xiaohua's eyes swept over Reverend Xiangtian and the nameless cultivator like lightning. Reverend Xiangtian flew into a rage and the flying sword in his hand flew into the air again. His previous misgivings were thrown far away as he loudly shouted, "Brat, what qualifications do you have to order this old man around? What divine ability do you have to kill this old man? What if I join in?" The nameless cultivator's eyes twitched in the face of Xiaohua's fierce expression. When he heard Reverend Xiangtian's challenge, his eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. He raised his hand and a small drumstick that he had put away earlier shined with a yellow light. "Join in I." Reverend Yuanqing finally arrived and said with a smile, Ming Hao's halberd in his hand. Reverend Xiangtian coldly snorted and said, "Even if it's the three of you, do you think this old man will be afraid of you?" However, although Reverend Xiangtian's voice was fierce, the flying sword in his hand didn't fly out. Xiaohua coldly smiled and said, "I don't know if you're afraid or not. What I do know is that if you don't cooperate with the three of us, not to mention the treasures on the cliff, even your life will be lost." With that said, Xiaohua pointed to the left and sternly shouted, "Take a look. The defensive formation is filled with weak winds and glaciers. There are also immortal soldiers and immortal generals hidden inside. Don't tell me you don't know the existence of these immortal generals and how powerful they are. A few golden core cultivators won't be able to fight back in front of them. Even nascent soul cultivators like us won't be able to escape if they surround us." Reverend Xiangtian's words were still unyielding. "That's what you think? This old man naturally has his own divine ability. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You're just using the excuse of cooperation to prevent this old man from obtaining the treasures." Xiaohua ignored Reverend Xiangtian and turned to the nameless cultivator. He cupped his hands and said, "I am Xiaohua of Black Cloud Mountain. How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" The nameless cultivator smiled and said, "I am Su Tingzi of the Jingxi Mountain Villa." "Good." Xiaohua nodded and asked, "Fellow Taoist Su Tingzi, do you wish to sign with the Imperial Teacher?" "The Imperial Teacher's sign?" Su Tingzi smiled. "I don't need it." "Yes." Xiaohua nodded and smiled. "I need the Imperial Teacher's sign. Since fellow Taoist needs different things, we should be able to work together." "As you wish." Su Tingzi was even more delighted. "Your wish is my wish. Reverend Xiangtian." Xiaohua glanced at Reverend Xiangtian. "Do you want to oppose the three of us?" "So what if I oppose you?" "So what if I don't oppose you?" Reverend Xiangtian looked around and saw that the weak wind had already started to condense. These strands of weak wind gradually turned into hurricanes. When these weak winds converged into hurricanes, even a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator like him wouldn't be able to deal with them. He had no choice but to find a way out of this situation. "I won't talk about the consequences of opposing you," Xiaohua said indifferently. "If you want to work together, then let's put aside our grudges for the time being. As for the strange treasure on the cliff, let's put it aside for the time being. We'll first work together to protect ourselves and use our divine abilities to break this defensive formation." "Ah, Xiaohua, are you joking?" Reverend Xiangtian didn't wait for Xiaohua to finish speaking and laughed loudly. "Break this defensive formation? Do you know what this defensive formation is? How dare you talk about breaking it so arrogantly?" Xiaohua slightly frowned and said indifferently, "Since it's a formation, it can be broken regardless of whether it's a Taoist formation or a Confucian formation. I don't think there's anything wrong with what I said." Reverend Xiangtian coldly snorted. "The ignorant are truly fearless. Let this old man tell you, although this old man doesn't know what this imperial formation is, seeing that it can injure both you and me, this imperial formation must be one of the famous 28-star sovereign imperial formations of the Jade Pavilion Conference. In the past, the cultivators who participated in the Jade Pavilion Conference were able to walk out of this defensive formation and obtain the Imperial Teacher's sign. There was no need to go through any selection. I've never heard of the 28-star monarch defensive formations being broken. Let's hear Reverend Xiao out. Reverend Yuanqing said coldly. You and I might not be able to break this defensive formation, but it's still possible for us to protect ourselves and obtain the strange treasure inside the defensive formation. That's right. Xiaohua took advantage of the situation and said, we'll first work together to protect ourselves and then obtain the strange treasure together. If it's the Imperial Teacher's sign, then I'll thank you 3 fellow Taoists. If it's not the Imperial Teacher's sign, then after we escape from the defensive formation, you 3 will discuss how to divide it. Who's going to take the strange treasure? Reverend Xiangtian asked straightforwardly. Xiaohua said proudly, naturally it's me. Why is it you and not me? Reverend Xiangtian was immediately dissatisfied. 'Cause I'm Xiaohua. Xiaohua looked at Reverend Xiangtian and said word by word. Reverend Yuanqing clapped his hands. I agree. What about you? Fellow Taoist Su Tingzi. Xiaohua looked at Su Tingzi. Su Tingzi pondered for a moment. He looked at Reverend Yuanqing and then at his air-frozen bead, which had already begun to waver. He couldn't help but say tentatively, I'm afraid this air-frozen bead won't be able to last for long. If Reverend Xiao has the means to protect us while we head to the place where the strange treasure is, then I'll agree for fellow Taoists to take it. Yes, I'll naturally agree to this. As Xiaohua spoke, he waved his hand and the weak water bead flew into the air. As soon as the weak water bead flew out, puffs of weak water fell down and formed a water curtain of varying density that protected the 4 of them. The dense weak water blocked the weak wind. Although the weak wind was able to pass through the sparse weak water, Reverend Yuanqing and the others could see through the sparse weak water. The weak wind that passed through the sparse weak water couldn't threaten the safety of the 4 of them. Good. I'll listen to Reverend Zhao's arrangement. Su Tingzi was overjoyed and hastily put away the air-frozen bead. Reverend Xiangqian looked at the weak water bead above Xiaohua's head and his eyes flickered. The current situation had already been decided. If he didn't agree to Xiaohua's request, then Xiaohua would definitely make a move. Reverend Xiangtian had the strength to fight against Reverend Yuanqing and Su Tingzi, but now that Xiaohua's strength was unfathomable. Reverend Xiangtian pondered for a moment and said indifferently, given the current situation, do I still have a choice? Let's go. Seeing that Reverend Xiangtian didn't object, Xiaohua didn't beat around the bush. He pointed at the weak water bead and flew toward the cliff. Reverend Xiangtian was even faster than Reverend Yuanqing and Su Tingzi. His body swayed and landed on Xiaohua's left hand. He was within the range of the weak water bead and maintained a sufficient distance from Xiaohua. Reverend Yuanqing wasn't in a hurry. He raised his hand slightly and signaled Su Tingzi to fly in front while he followed Xiaohua behind. Chapter 3609. Rumble. Innumerable pillars of weak wind raged within the defensive array, as though they were going to tear the entire space apart. The pillars of wind hit the weak water, causing the water curtain of the weak water to shake violently, and a lot of weak wind rushed into it. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Su Tingzi didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly took out the air-frozen pearl. Under the pale white brilliance, the weak wind weakened by 60%. The weakened weak wind naturally couldn't threaten the 4 nascent soul cultivators. Immortal Yuanqing stole a glance at the weak wind storm outside the brilliance and trembled in his heart. He knew very well that if it weren't for Xiaohua and Su Tingzi, he would have some means to deal with the weak wind. However, after using these means, his strength would be greatly reduced. Not to mention snatching the rare treasure, he might not even be able to escape from this defensive formation. The most likely outcome was that he would die in the formation of one of the 28 celestial lords. This immortal Yuanqing was greatly astonished and muttered to himself, it seems that the previous Jadestage gathering wasn't like this? Why is this year's Jadestage gathering so strange? Unfortunately, there were only unexpected things in this world, but there was nothing that others could not achieve. Just as Reverend Yuanqing thought he was lucky, a series of crackling noises that sounded like thunderclaps were heard from the sky above the defensive formation. Streams of icy rivers that were several times stronger than before poured down in torrents. Weak gusts of wind crashed into the icy rivers, and soldiers that were tens of feet tall and even hundreds of feet tall gushed out. These soldiers were either roaring barefooted or riding on horseback while brandishing their spears as they charged toward the four men along with the icy rivers. "Watch this old man's technique." Immortal Xiangtian roared and waved his arms. The flying sword in his left hand turned into a cold plum and rushed out of the air-frozen pearl's brilliance to protect the weak water pearl. The cold plum slightly rotated and the sword rays emitted a glaring brilliance. Immortal Xiangtian's right hand let out a roar from the cauldron. Samadhi true fire flew out from the cauldron and formed a layer of fire shield around the cold plum sword rays. Xiaohua's weak water droplet could only block the weak wind. It could not block the condensed ice river soldiers. When the valiant soldiers rushed into the weak water droplet, they were immediately killed by the Samadhi true fire. They either turned into the weak wind, or turned into the ice river and fell down. Even if there were some that were not killed by the Samadhi true fire, the cold plum blossom sword light behind it could also kill them. Immortal Xiangtian really lives up to his reputation. Xiaohua understood and nodded his head inwardly. He also understood that there must be something else in Reverend Xiangtian's Samadhi true fire. Although Xiaohua didn't mention how the treasures would be distributed after obtaining the imperial tutor's lot, it was clear that if one didn't contribute, they wouldn't have the qualifications to obtain the treasures. Once Taoist Xiangtian revealed his two treasures, Su Tingzi and Taoist Yuan Qing immediately paled in comparison. Taoist Xiangtian couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Of course, Immortal Yuan Qing wouldn't agree. He waved his hand and was about to use the halberd when Xiaohua sneered and said, "Immortal Yuan Qing, about 10 feet away from your left hand, attack with all your strength." Immortal Yuan Qing was stunned. However, he didn't dare to be careless. He circulated all the magic energy in his body and the immortal halberd in his hand roared. It turned into a blue dragon and pounced towards the area 10 feet away from him. That was where the weak wind and the ice river had just appeared. Boom! Before the immortal halberd reached the ice river, the space around him was covered by the halberd's aura. Kacha, kacha, sounds came from the ice river. When the dragon pounced into the ice river, a blood-curdling scream was heard. The immortal general wearing immortal armor fell out of his chest with a bloody hole. The immortal general's face was filled with disbelief. "Sii." Immortal Yuan Qing sucked in a breath of cold air, let alone immortal Xiangtian and Su Tingzi. This was an immortal general, a Confucian cultivator with 4th-grade origin energy. His strength was comparable to an early nascent soul cultivator. Even though he was hiding in the defensive formation, he was still seen through by Xiaohua. Xiaohua's words about breaking the formation were not just empty words. 30 feet above your head. Xiaohua shouted again. Immortal Yuan Qing no longer had any doubts. The immortal halberd once again soared into the sky. Another blood-curdling scream was heard. The second immortal general was killed on the spot. Too powerful. Immortal Yuan Qing was full of admiration for Xiaohua. Su Tingzi 20 feet ahead. Xiaohua shouted again. Su Tingzi's face lit up with joy. The small drumstick in his hand flew out. Woo! A clear sound came from the drumstick. A yellow light condensed into a sharp arrow and disappeared into the void. When it reappeared, it was already 20 feet away from the weak wind. As the three expected, the corpse of a decapitated immortal general appeared again. Go! Xiaohua ordered again. The three hurriedly used their flying techniques and followed Xiaohua for several hundred feet. Kill! Kill! Following Xiaohua's orders, close to 10 immortal generals were forced out of the defensive formation. Of course, these 10 immortal generals were not killed. Among them, 4 were only seriously injured. Then they borrowed the power of the defensive formation to escape. After these 4 immortal generals escaped, the entire defensive formation became a little quieter. No other immortal generals flew out to kill them. Without the immortal generals blocking them, the 4 arrived at the bottom of the cliff in a short while. The light of the strange treasure above their heads could be seen clearly. It was a square jade box. Let's fly over. Immortal Yuan Qing, take it? Xiaohua did not wait for the 3 to say anything. He immediately ordered, Then I will take care of it. But Immortal Yuan Qing did not hesitate. He urged his body to fly up with Xiaohua. However, as the four approached the cliff, Immortal Yuan Qing was about to reach out his hand. Rumble. The entire defensive formation let out a loud rumble. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. All the sounds of the flute, the river of ice, and the army were drowned out. In front of Xiaohua and the others, the entire cliff was shaking. With this shaking, the cliff rapidly retreated. Even the weak wind, the river of ice, and the sound of the flute disappeared in the shaking. What is going on? Immortal Yuan Qing was shocked. His hand unconsciously froze. Looking at the jade box within reach, Immortal Yuan Qing involuntarily used his divine ability. A large hand came out of his sleeve and streaked across the sky, chasing after the fleeing cliff. The nascent soul hand can be used. Divine sense can be used as well. Immortal Yuan Qing was overjoyed. After a sweep of his divine sense, he exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, the halberd of Ming Hao flew out and flew toward the cliff in the distance. Yes, divine sense can be used. Immortal Xiang Tian was also overjoyed. However, he immediately cried out, "Not good, this defensive formation seems to have expanded a lot." Without waiting for him to finish speaking, a slightly hoarse voice called out from the distant horizon, Where is this? Io, is this a rare treasure? Let's see who dares to snatch it from this old man." Before the voice fell, a large hand that was several times larger than Immortal Yuan Qing's nascent soul hand streaked across the sky. Following the large hand was a magic treasure that was not inferior to Ming Hao's halberd. It released a powerful aura and fell toward the cliff. A rare treasure? Who dares to snatch it from me? Immediately after, an extremely arrogant voice came from the other side. Another large hand appeared in the sky. Xiaohua's soul had already swept through the entire defensive formation. Just as Immortal Xiang Tian had said, the defensive formation had expanded by several times. Within this expanded range, there were more than 20 nascent soul cultivators and hundreds of gold core cultivators. There were far more cultivators than the ones who had fallen into the defensive formation before. There was no need to think too much about it. Xiaohua already understood that the Star Monarch defense array that these cultivators had fallen into earlier was definitely not the Star Monarch defense array. This Star Monarch defense array must have connected several or even dozens of other defense arrays together. Either it wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop, or it wanted to take advantage of the situation. However, regardless of what the people of Celestial Lord Hall were planning, Xiaohua's plan had failed. Reverend Xiangqian had already taken out 2 more magic treasures and used his nascent soul hand to snatch the jade box from Reverend Yuan Qing and the others. Reverend Yuan Qing, who was not far away, saw that his divine ability was inferior to the others and called out, "Reverend Xiao, quickly give this poor Taoist a hand." Xiaohua frowned. He felt that Immortal Yuan Qing's call was a bit abrupt, but he didn't think too much about it. After all, he was the one who had come up with the plan. It was normal for Immortal Yuan Qing to ask for help if he couldn't get the jade box. Thus, Xiaohua clapped his hand and the nascent soul hand immediately rushed out and grabbed towards the cliff. Xiaohua's nascent soul hand was much larger than the others, and its speed was also much faster. However, just as he was halfway there, the nascent soul hands that rushed out earlier felt that they were not as fast as Xiaohua. Immediately, there was a rumbling sound as they all flipped their hands at the same time. Several nascent soul hands grabbed at Xiaohua's large hand. Seeing that Taoist Yuanqing's hand was still in the lead, Xiaohua understood Taoist Yuanqing's intention. With a flip of his hand expanded once again, tightly grabbing the hands of several nascent soul cultivators. Kacha! The entire space trembled. Xiaohua's giant hand shook a few times and tore apart the other nascent soul cultivators' giant hands. Only when the several giant hands slowly disappeared did Xiaohua's giant hand collapse with a loud bang. Everyone turned pale with fright and looked at each other. At this moment, a deafening sound of a flute rang out above everyone's heads. The sound of wind and water appeared again. What made everyone tremble with fear was that a three-colored giant python fell from the sky with an indescribable majesty along with the sound of the flute. The three-colored majesty filled the entire defensive formation. Whether it was the cauldron, the flying sword, or the Hongming halberd, they all paled in comparison. Immortal Xiang Tian turned pale with fright. His heart trembled as he whispered, 28th Star Lord. Chapter 3610. Just as Taoist Xiangtian let out a low cry, the three-colored giant python had already landed on Xiaohua's back. Xiaohua's nascent soul hand had just collapsed, so he simply didn't have the time to use a divine ability to resist. Boom! The giant python pierced Xiaohua's back, revealing a bowl-shaped spear. Poof! Xiaohua seemed to have been struck by lightning, and he spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His entire body trembled a few times on the spear before slowly falling down, and his arm powerlessly drooped down. Taoist Xiao. Taoist Yuan Qing raised his eyebrows. The appearance of this long spear was really unexpected. Seeing that Xiaohua was seriously injured, Taoist Yuan Qing seemed to have thought of something. He cried out in alarm and stopped. That huge hand that was rushing towards the sky and the halberd that was following closely behind also restrained its brilliance and carefully stopped in midair. The spear that had injured Xiaohua paused for a moment beside Xiaohua, as if it was hesitating. Then, it turned back into a python and flew back into the sky. The pressure that caused all the nascent soul cultivators to tremble disappeared without a trace. Taoist Xiangtian let out a cold snort and the giant hand that had stopped moved once again. While the nascent soul cultivators were hesitating, it immediately rushed forward. Taoist Xiangtian turned into a rainbow and the cold plum blossom flying sword let out a thunderous roar as it protected him. It was as if he wasn't afraid of being killed by the celestial monarch. Xiaohua! Taoist Yuan Qing stood in the air and scanned Xiaohua's body with his divine sense. He frowned as if he was hesitating, but only for a moment. Taoist Yuan Qing also turned into a rainbow and the halberd shined brightly. With a thunderous roar, a ferocious dragon shape appeared once again. However, this dragon shape didn't chase after Taoist Yuan Qing. Instead, it waited in the air until Taoist Yuan Qing flew past it before charging into Taoist Yuan Qing's golden light shield. Su Tingzi was originally in a daze, but when he saw Taoist Yuan Qing also abandon Xiaohua, he immediately understood. The reason the celestial official in charge of the defensive formation killed Xiaohua was not because Xiaohua wanted to snatch the rare treasure. The rare treasure of the defensive formation was something that should be snatched. Instead, it was because Xiaohua and the other three had killed the immortal general controlling the formation. Or perhaps it could be said that because of Xiaohua's existence, the four people who should have been fighting fiercely did not fight to the death. Instead, they formed a rope. Although they did not have the strength to break through the defensive formation, they still made the star venerates guarding the formation feel afraid, which was why they attacked. Sigh. Su Tingzi looked at where Xiaohua had landed and wanted to help. However, he didn't dare to offend the star monarch controlling the array. After all, the star monarch guarding the array was a 5th-stage origin Qi realm cultivator. He was far from being a match for him. However, Su Tingzi sighed. He knew that he no longer had the advantage of being the first to enter the array. At this moment, even the other nascent soul cultivators who had just entered the array were stronger than him, let alone Sage Xiangtian. He could only look for other opportunities. As a result, Su Tingzi decided not to snatch the treasure. Instead, he released his divine sense and carefully observed the movements of the defensive formation. He wanted to find an opportunity to escape from the defensive formation. Moreover, Su Tingzi was selfish. He wasn't too far away from where Xiaohua had landed. When the defensive formation was in chaos, he wanted to see if he could bring the heavily injured Xiaohua along with him. Of course, this was only a trace of kindness. Su Tingzi didn't know if the star monarch controlling the formation would let Xiaohua go. Taoist Yuan Qing and Sage Xiangtian moved. Whether it was their nascent soul cultivators or their escape techniques, they immediately alerted the other nascent soul cultivators. In the beginning, the other cultivators were naturally puzzled. They thought that the two of them were not afraid of death and dared to oppose the star monarch guarding the formation. However, when they saw that the two of them were getting closer and closer to the treasure and that murderous tricolored python spear had yet to appear, how could they still hold themselves back? Damn it! A nascent soul mid-stage cultivator angrily cursed. He opened his mouth and a magic treasure that looked like a string of beads rushed into the air. Then the entire string of beads exploded. As the cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood essence on it, the beads transformed into sinister skulls. They let out soul-stirring screeches in the air and rushed towards the treasure as fast as lightning. Another cultivator slapped his forehead. A very delicate crane emerged from the top of his head. It let out a soft cry in the air and flapped its wings before falling into the void. When it reappeared, it was already 300 meters away. There were even several nascent soul cultivators who let out loud roars. Magic power surged around their bodies and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth madly poured into them. They either flickered with golden light or faintly glowed with green light. There was even one who had a demonic body. Feeling that they could not stop others from obtaining the treasure, the cultivators prepared to intercept sage Xiangtian or Taoist Yuan Qing from all directions. However, the cultivator who had a demonic body was a strange winged demonic body. When he spread his wings, his flight was equally astonishing. He joined the ranks of the cultivators who fought for the treasure. The nascent soul cultivators within the defensive formation each used their own methods to fight for the treasure. How could the 100 or so golden core cultivators who were swept into the defensive formation dare to approach? They did not even have the intention to take advantage of the situation like Su Tingzi. They only trembled as they descended. They were prepared to find some spiritual herbs and other items within the defensive formation. Otherwise, they would wait in a safe place and escape when a flaw appeared in the defensive formation. The nascent soul cultivator with the demonic body seemed to be the fastest. In just a few breaths, he had already caught up to the hand of a nascent soul cultivator. How could the hand let him go? The hand whistled and grabbed at the air, wanting to stop the cultivator. Kaka! The nascent soul cultivator let out a long laugh. He did not use any other abilities. Instead, he flapped his wings and charged toward the hand. Rumble! A loud sound echoed through the defensive formation once more. A large hole was created in the hand of the nascent soul cultivator. The nascent soul cultivator's demonic body staggered and was about to fly back into the sky. However, at that moment, a ray of light appeared. It was an unknown nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure that blocked the path of the nascent soul cultivator. Pa! Just as the ray of light appeared, it immediately turned into a 5-colored screen and covered the nascent soul cultivator before the nascent soul cultivator could see it clearly. Not only that, but right after the loud noise, the entire defensive formation shook again. The life-threatening sound of the pipa rang out, and the Ice River Iron Horses broke free from their reins. This formation was even stranger than the one Xiaohua and the others had encountered before. After the sound of the pipa, the sound of the whistle also rang out. The weak wind and the dense fog coexisted, and there was a sense of harmony between the zither and the zither. Kill! Battle cries rang out from the omnipresent cavalry. The already chaotic defensive formation became even more chaotic as battle cries shook the heavens. Damn it! Seeing that his head was blocked by the 5-colored light and that there was a dazzling light coming toward him, the nascent soul cultivator was furious. Blue light appeared around his body like a wave and a dragon horn gradually appeared on his forehead. The moment the horn appeared, his aura increased and his wings expanded even more. He flapped his wings and his demonic body charged toward the light like a meteor. He wanted to break this magic treasure just like he had broken through the nascent soul cultivator's hand. However, he didn't notice that a weak wind was quietly blowing above his head. Puff! The nascent soul crashed into the countless screens of light. The screens of light closed up like a peacock folding its wings. However, in front of the screens of light, a ray of blue light shot out like a sharp thorn. Boom! The space several dozen feet around him shook. The magic treasure was actually shattered by the nascent soul cultivator's nascent soul cultivator. Puff! In the distance, a short nascent soul cultivator's expression changed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. It was clear that his life source magic treasure had been destroyed and he had suffered a lot of damage. However, before he could take out a healing pill from his chinkuan bag, he heard a burst of ear-piercing pipa music below him. A dozen ice spears suddenly pierced toward him, scaring the cultivator into hastily forming hand seals. A light as large as a mountain smashed down and blocked the ice spears. Whoosh! Immediately after, a weak wind blew and a sizzling sound could be heard. The short cultivator's already somewhat dim protective light was blown out even more. Not good. The short cultivator grew alert and hastily slapped his forehead. A 5-meter-tall nascent soul appeared with a broken fan in its hand. However, there was a trace of golden blood at the corner of the nascent soul's mouth and its face was dispirited. Shwa! The moment the nascent soul appeared, it immediately rubbed its hands and the fan fell. The 5-colored light was about to cover the cultivator's body once more. Unfortunately, just as the 5-colored brilliance swept past the cultivator's neck, an iron spear emerged from the wind and mysteriously pierced the cultivator's back. Ayo! The small nascent soul let out a roar. It was clearly extremely angry. It reached out and a blood-red restriction smashed down like thunder. Boom! After a loud bang, the iron spear broke in half and was thrown into the air. A mouthful of blood came out of the wind, but when the wind blew by, everything disappeared. Damn it! The nascent soul helplessly looked at its lifeless body and the large hole in its back. It let out a sharp curse, then light surged around its body and it was about to fly away. Just at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Woo! A dense fog appeared. It was several times more dense than anywhere else. Along with this dense fog, an aura that could even suffocate a grade 5 origin energy cultivator came out from the nascent soul's body. A pillar of boundless chi that was even more solid than the nascent soul's hand covered the nascent soul. GG. The nascent soul was shocked. As it screamed, it spat out several mouthfuls of blood, which turned into extremely bright symbols. The symbols disappeared into the nascent soul's body. The nascent soul's body disappeared in the blink of an eye. This nascent soul wanted to use teleportation to escape from the boundless chi pillar. Boom! The boundless chi pillar rumbled as it rushed into the void, causing the surrounding space to distort intensely. That nascent soul no longer made any sound. Furthermore, the rumbling sound of the boundless chi pillar was not that loud compared to the neighs of the glacier war horses. The group of cultivators who were focused on the treasures on the cliff did not notice the disappearance of a nascent soul. Chapter 3611. Since the nascent soul stage adepts who had sneak attacked others ended up in such a miserable state, the nascent soul stage adepts who had been sneak attacked did not fare any better. The Dharma stage adept with a demon body had just rushed out of the magic treasure with his powerful demon body. The green light around him flashed rapidly, as if his Dharma power was not enough to support his Dharma form. At this moment, the ice river suddenly flowed, and a group of armored horses stepped on the ice and surrounded him in an instant. Although the sound of cracking could be heard at the beginning, when the wind blew and the fog arrived, the nascent soul stage adept with a demon body did not appear again. Which of the dozens of nascent soul stage adepts was not arrogant? Which of them would be willing to submit to others? Which of them would care about the ice river and armored horses created by the defense array? Even if they found out that someone was injured or killed, they would only feel happy. They would only feel that there was one less person competing with them. Who would think more about it? On the contrary, the golden elixir stage adepts began to gather together and form a certain formation to resist the defense array together. Of course, their strength was insignificant in this battle between the 28 Star Lords. In a short time, dozens of adepts had fallen. Fortunately, they were not the main targets of the Star Lord Palace, so there were no immortal generals around them. Sigh. Since ancient times, the onlookers had a clearer view of the situation. Su Tingzi did not feel much when he was fighting for the rare treasure, but now that he was standing at the side and saw how fierce the defense array was, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. If this Yaotai meeting is so dangerous, even if it's for the Imperial Preceptor's lot, even if it's for the rare treasure, who would still participate? Could it be that Kong Hongwu is stupid? In just half a day, several nascent soul stage adepts and dozens of golden elixir stage adepts have fallen in this defense array. What about the other defense arrays? Moreover, there are immortal soldiers and immortal generals hiding in the fog and in the weak water. It is far from what the rumors said before that the defense array was only created by the defense array. Could it be that this Yaotai meeting is different from the previous ones? In the past, no matter how few the Imperial Preceptor's lots were, there were at least dozens or even 50. How could there only be 10? No matter how rare the rare treasures in the past were, it seemed that they could not be compared to this one. Previously, when this old man heard about the rare treasure, I was already blinded by greed. Now that I think about it, isn't this a dead end? Su Tingzi immediately broke out in a cold sweat when he thought of the death trap. Since it was a death trap, how could there be any survivors? Since it was a dead end, how could he allow anyone to speak of this matter? In an instant, Su Tingzi understood why the Star Lord Hall had given out the lot of 10 Imperial advisors and why they had taken out 3 rare treasures. Perhaps there were survivors and there were 13 of them. Perhaps more, but definitely not too much. The Confucian cultivator's methods are truly too ruthless. Su Tingzi didn't know why the Confucian cultivator was so ruthless, but he knew that this trip wasn't a good one. What should we do? Su Tingzi's gaze was fixed on the Imperial Array. Cries of murder filled the entire Imperial Array. Reverend Xiangtian and Reverend Yuanqing's figures had already disappeared. The Dharma treasures on the cliff shone with boundless brilliance, and the pillars of Oren Qi soared into the sky. However, the dense fog and weak water blocked all of this. Su Tingzi could only see the golden core cultivators fleeing in panic like ants. Perhaps I'll have a chance to survive if I mix in with the golden core cultivators. However, if I do that, how am I supposed to live in the future? How am I supposed to survive in the Dao sect? What a pity! If only Xiao Hua was here. That's right, Xiao Hua. That Taoist Xiao seemed to have been injured by the Star Lord guarding the array, but he didn't die like the other nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, that python spear hesitated for a moment, as if it was confirming Xiao Hua's death. Damn it, I'll go all out. Thinking of Xiao Hua's abilities, Su Tingzi couldn't help but feel excited. Xiao Hua was still alive even after being killed by a Star Lord at the 5th stage of origin energy. This level of strength was far beyond his reach. If he could save Xiao Hua, not only would he be indebted to him, he could even borrow Xiao Hua's strength to escape from the Imperial Array. Su Tingzi weighed the pros and cons. He looked at the sky, then looked at the fierce battle in the distance. After destroying a few glaciers, he quietly landed at the place where Xiao Hua had landed. Su Tingzi looked into the distance and also thought about the sky. However, he forgot that he was also a nascent soul cultivator. Some golden core cultivators not too far away from him were also thinking about him. Seeing Su Tingzi quietly land, about 20 golden core cultivators exchanged glances and also followed him to the bottom of the Imperial Array from a distance. The golden core cultivators thought very well, but when they got close to Su Tingzi, they were dumbfounded. They thought that Su Tingzi had found a flaw in the defensive formation, but when they saw Su Tingzi, they only saw him carrying the unconscious Xiao Hua with one hand with a strange expression on his face. Su Tingzi was even more dumbfounded than these golden core cultivators. However, he didn't have time to think too much. Several weak winds and glaciers appeared between him and the golden core cultivators. Even if the golden core cultivators fought bravely, 2 of them still died on the spot before Su Tingzi could make a move. We juniors are trapped in this Imperial Array and don't have the ability to escape. We only hope that Senior can help us. Once we leave the Imperial Array, we will definitely follow you through life and death. We will serve Senior or Senior's country. Seeing that Su Tingzi had made a move, the 2 late golden core cultivators at the front were overjoyed and hastily spoke. Don't. Su Tingzi raised his hand and quickly waved it, but before he could say anything, his expression froze. Then his eyes darted around a few times and he changed the topic. There was some bitterness and some difficulty in his voice as he said, "Forget it. Since we are fated to meet, why not help you this time?" How could the Golden Core cultivators notice that Su Tingzi's tone was strange? All of them were about to bow, but just as they were about to do so, Su Tingzi spoke again. "However, even I am powerless within the defense formation. I still have to split my energy to take care of all of you. Swear a blood oath right now, or I won't agree." Su Tingzi's words were very honest. No one would risk their lives for a cultivator they didn't know. The Golden Core cultivators' words from before were indeed a bit careless, so the two Golden Core cultivators at the front didn't hesitate to make the oath. Sure enough, among the 20 or so cultivators, there were still 4 Golden Core cultivators who weren't sincere. They didn't wait to make the blood oath before activating their magic treasures and rushing elsewhere. They must be looking for their own opportunities inside the Imperial Array. Su Tingzi looked at the backs of these cultivators and coldly smiled. He waved his hand and said, "Activate your magic treasures and form an ordinary formation behind me." Although the Golden Core cultivator at the front had said his name when he made the oath, how could Su Tingzi remember it at this critical moment? He pointed with his finger and said, You, the 3 of you stand in front of the other people's heads. The rest of you, find 3 people to stand behind them, yes." The Golden Core disciple at the front hurriedly agreed. He turned around and called out a few names. They lined up according to Su Tingzi's instructions. At this moment, a weak wind blew, and the ice river appeared. Su Tingzi led the nearly 20 Golden Core cultivators into the wind and rain of the formation. With a nascent soul cultivator like Su Tingzi taking care of them, the 20 Golden Core cultivators only paid the price of 2 Golden Core cultivators being injured. Su Tingzi's magic treasure was shaped like a drumstick. When he activated it with all his strength, it produced a yellow glow around it. It was called the Heaven-Shaking Hammer. In the time it took to finish a cup of tea, it was able to kill a few dozen Golden Core cultivators and even a dozen immortal soldiers. However, the more he killed, the paler Su Tingzi's face became. There was even extreme fear in his eyes. Occasionally, he would look at the sky as if he was afraid of attracting the attention of the Star Monarch guarding the Imperial Array. When he looked at the cliff, there was even more fog and light. He didn't know how many nascent soul cultivators were still alive, and he didn't know who had obtained the treasure inside the jade box. Seeing that the wind was getting weaker, both the sound of the pipa and the whistle were getting weaker, Su Tingzi's eyes were filled with joy. He waved his hand and whispered, "Quick, follow me and increase our speed. There should be a result over there." This Imperial Array. Unfortunately, before Su Tingzi could finish speaking, he heard a loud whistle and a 3-colored python descended from above his head. At the same time, an unparalleled aura came crashing down like a huge mountain. "Save me!" Su Tingzi was shocked and let out a heart-wrenching scream. It was as if he had long been afraid of this aura. As Su Tingzi circulated his spiritual energy, the golden light around him shined brightly. The Heaven-Shaking Hammer turned into a giant hammer and charged at the 3-colored python. As for Xiao Hua, who was still in his hand, he casually tossed him to the side. Boom! The Heaven-Shaking Hammer flew into the air, but before it could even touch the python spear, it was sent flying. However, the strange thing was that Su Tingzi didn't seem to have any intention of fighting the python spear head-on. Although the Heaven-Shaking Hammer was sent flying and Su Tingzi's face was pale, his body continued to fly backward. Roar! The python's spear was like a dragon. It let out an angry roar and stabbed towards Su Tingzi's heart even faster than Su Tingzi's retreat. Under the 3-colored light, Su Tingzi's face was ashen. He stared at where the python's spear came from as if he wanted to see the Star Lord's face clearly. When the python spear was less than 6 feet away from Su Tingzi, a ray of golden light shot out from the side of the python spear. The golden light shot into the air and a thunderous sound echoed. Then, a miserable scream rang out and the python's spear stopped in midair. Xiao Hua, who had been thrown into the air by Su Tingzi, suddenly jumped up. He reached out and used the universe in the sleeve on a 3-colored python spear. Although the python spear had returned to its original form, It seemed to have a life of its own as it trembled violently. Wails came from the body of the spear, and strands of righteous spirit rushed out like an aura. Even when Xiaohua's magic power reached out, the Taoist robe fell on the body of the spear, and a thick pillar of Aoran Qi roared with a powerful roar, smashing onto Xiaohua's universe in the sleeve, wanting to work together with the python spear to destroy Xiaohua's magic. Chapter 36:12. Unfortunately, no matter how much the python's spear struggled, even if the weak wind, thick fog and icy river above Xiaohua's head disappeared, revealing a clear sky, the python's spear still sadly fell into Xiaohua's hands and instantly disappeared. Only then did another drop of blood fall from the sky. All the golden core cultivators prostrated themselves before this aura. While they trembled with fear, they didn't have any thoughts of fighting back at all. However, they were extremely shocked as well. After seeing Su Tingzi's situation, how could they not know that everything had been set up by Xiaohua? Even them following Su Tingzi was a move by Xiaohua to lure the star monarch guarding the formation? The few sharp-eyed cultivators who were the first to fall into this defensive formation saw the might of the tricolored python spear when it killed Xiaohua. Then they saw that Xiaohua was still alive and kicking, as if he was not injured at all. The hope in their hearts rose again. A sound that shook the space hundreds of feet in radius fell from the clear sky above everyone's heads. Countless pillars of noble qi descended once again, and everyone's vision darkened. A golden-armored celestial general that was hundreds of feet tall blocked the light that shone into the defensive formation. At the same time, a huge amount of noble qi rushed into the celestial general's left hand, and a huge golden hand slowly appeared in midair. Looking at the celestial general's appearance again, wasn't it one of the 28 star monarchs that had appeared in front of the Yaotai mountain? The aura of this star monarch was like his huge body. Wisps of golden fog flowed out from his golden armor and condensed into huge inscriptions on the armor. Each inscription gave off a powerful aura that was not inferior to the aura of a golden core cultivator. The aura of the inscriptions on the armor gathered together as if it was real, blocking everyone's mouths and noses. The fear of not being able to face an enemy involuntarily rose from the bottom of the hearts of the golden core cultivators. Even Su Tingzi, who had escaped death and looked lucky, could not help but release his aura to resist with all his might. Just as the crowd was in fear, a similarly powerful pillar of qi appeared opposite the celestial lord. With a roar, it rushed into a gradually expanding golden body. Waves of golden light emerged from the golden body like the rising sun, and a similarly rising pressure overflowed from the golden body. Wasn't this Xiaohua's transcendence golden body? Xiaohua's transcendence golden body appeared and immediately fought against the Star Lord's golden body. A series of violent crackling sounds were produced in the void between the two. In the midst of this explosive sound, the group of Jindan cultivators was blown far away. They actually didn't even have the ability to get close to it. Su Tingzi's eyes turned. Seeing that Ruo Feng, Bing He and the others near Xiaohua's golden body had disappeared, he hastily flew towards the golden core cultivators, quietly preparing to sneak out with these golden core cultivators. "You are very powerful." That star monarch watched Xiaohua's golden body form and indifferently said. That voice was like a yellow bell that shook the surroundings loudly. However, once you enter Yaotai Mountain, you will not have the opportunity to leave. This old man is Star Monarch Hall's Star Monarch Jingmushuan. If you become a star general under this old man's tutelage, this old man will not only guarantee your survival, but will also allow you to obtain everything you want. Whatever you need in your cultivation, whether it is cultivation methods or medicinal pills, this old man can give them all to you. Star Monarch Jingmushuan? Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed. He sneered and said, "You dare use the name of the 28 lunar mansions. You truly are arrogant. If this old man were to become your subordinate, wouldn't this old man's illustrious name be sullied? Since ancient times, Confucianism and Taoism have been different. Since this old man has chosen Taoism, he will not wallow in the mire with Confucianism cultivators like you. Ha! You insignificant Taoism cultivator is the arrogant one. Even if you have touched the threshold of essence energy 5th rank, even if you have a scheme to make this old man fall into your trap, how could you know that this old man was probing you? However, this old man was somewhat careless, not expecting your magic weapon to be this powerful. A moment of carelessness and I fell into your trap, that's all. Jing Mushuan laughed heartily. Pointing his finger at the soaring dragon shears flying above Xiaohua's head, he said, "This old man likes that you have some abilities, and this old man just happens to have a vacancy for a star general. This is why this old man said these few words to you. Otherwise, this old man could kill you right now." Noisy. This old man has never seen such an arrogant absorption like yours. Don't you think you'll cut your tongue if you talk big? Xiaohua was unmoved. This old man has only used 30% of his abilities, and you are not my opponent. If I use all of my abilities, would you not die on the spot? Forget it. Jing Mushuan seemed to have lost his patience. Clenching his hand, a thick and vast pillar of qi condensed into an enormous spear in his hand. This old man knows your intentions. It's a pity that even if you stall for time, those little things cannot possibly break out of the star array. Even you are about to fall into the star array. Woo! Jing Mushuan opened his mouth, and a mouthful of tricolored true qi rushed into the air like a waterfall. Rumble! The earth quaked and the mountains swayed, and the entire mountain ridge swayed. Immediately, that mountain ridge rumbled, and two enormous dragon figures slowly emerged. And at the cliff between the two mountain ridges, a cloud several hundred zhang in size appeared. A portion of the tricolored true qi fell into it, immediately drawing the vast amount of vast qi from the void to pour in. That cloud transformed into a tricolored ball of light that fell into the imperial array. The two dragon figures also roared as they rushed towards this ball of light. Two dragons playing with a pearl? Xiaohua somewhat understood, and his calm face became gloomy again. This was because, with his tyrannical divine sense, he had already understood that the two dragon figures really surrounded the entire star array in the center. When the dragon figures were hovering around the pearl, it had already driven the entire imperial array. The airflow inside the imperial array was like a knife. The nascent soul cultivators who were previously fighting stopped in horror, trying their best to resist this innate power. As for the nearly 50 gold core cultivators who were lucky enough to survive, they were like dandelions in the wind. They could only roll around, unable to resist. Jing Mushuan did not need to do anything at all. As long as he controlled the huge ball of light to trigger the dragon figures playing with the pearl, all the cultivators would be killed. Eat this old man's staff. Xiaohua smiled coldly and calmed his heart. He raised the wishful staff with both hands. The staff turned into hundreds of feet in size and smashed towards Jing Mushuan. The staff crossed the sky, and cracks appeared in the void. The whistling sound of the wind rushed into the cracks, and no one could hear it. Jing Mubao's face was full of contempt, but he didn't dare to be careless. The long spear in his hand also didn't dare to be careless. Woo! It let out a strange sound, and also went to meet Xiaohua. Not only that, when the long spear swayed, a pillar of great spirit as heavy as a mountain, and a great spirit as sharp as a flying sword also appeared around Xiaohua, rushing toward his golden body. Bang! The pillar of noble qi hit Xiaohua's body, and a dark golden crack appeared and a black liquid seeped out of the crack. Jing Mushuan's strength of the 5th level was not just for show. The power of this blow alone could kill a nascent soul cultivator. However, when the noble qi fell on Xiaohua's golden body, Xiaohua's wishful staff also smashed on Jing Mushuan's long spear. With a loud bang, not only was the long spear smashed, but Jing Mushuan's arm was also hit by the wishful staff. The newly regenerated left arm was now splashed with blood and flesh. See! Jing Mushuan sucked in a breath of cold air in pain and hurriedly urged his genuine qi. However, seeing the birth of three-colored genuine qi, his injured arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, one injury after another made Jing Mushuan's face even paler. I have to say, this old man has underestimated you, Jing Mubao said solemnly. He did not dare to neglect and hurriedly took out a huge strange weapon from his Qiankuan bag. The weapon looked like a long spear, but there was a big hand in front of his head. The hand was holding a thick dagger. Kill. Xiaohua already had the intention to kill. Without waiting for Jing Mushuan to take the weapon, the wishful staff in his hand stirred up the wind and clouds and struck again. Jing Mushuan was also a good martial artist. He waved his huge weapon and urged the abundant noble qi in the defensive array to fight with Xiaohua. These two huge golden bodies fought in a chaotic battle. In just half a cup of tea's time, the entire defensive array was disturbed by the two. Even the two dragon forms were not as powerful as the two. However, Xiaohua was not as calm as Jing Mushuan. He wanted to protect himself and save Su Tingzi and the others, so he must kill Jing Mushuan. Jing Mushuan was an immortal general of the 5th level. It was easy to defeat him, but how difficult was it to kill him? Also, Jing Mushuan could borrow the power of the defensive array, so the possibility of Xiaohua killing him was really small. In particular, Jing Mushuan was still fighting with Xiaohua with ease and did not borrow the power of the defensive array. Xiaohua waved his staff and knocked Jing Mushuan down half a foot. He squinted at Jing Mushuan's golden body and then looked at the two dragon forms in the distance. Unconsciously, he had a plan in mind. At this time, Xiaohua did not have his own spiritual treasure that could kill Jing Mushuan in one blow, but he would not test it one by one like before. However, Jing Mubao roared angrily, and a 3-colored auspicious cloud appeared under his feet. He waved his strange weapon again, and the Haoren-Chi swords that could flatten a mountain peak stabbed toward Xiaohua. A huge roar also came from the hand in front of the weapon. Although Xiaohua's golden body was cut down and collapsed piece by piece, his face was still as calm as water. The invisible nascent soul controlled by the green-robed Xiaohua quietly appeared above his head. The Tengjiao shears, which was flashing with golden light in midair, turned into a huge dragon again and rushed toward Jing Mushuan. That huge dragon swung its tail at Jing Mushuan's back. You have some skills. Seeing Xiaohua multitasking, using his divine thoughts to activate the Tengjiao shears while fighting him, Jing Mushuan was slightly surprised. Just as this faint surprise appeared, he saw a small gourd appear above Xiaohua's head. In the blink of an eye, something with a nose and eyes emerged from the mouth of the gourd. Jing Mushuan's mind was in a trance. Oh, not good. Jing Mushuan turned pale with fright and hurriedly patted his head. A 3-colored genuine qi rushed into the sky and instantly turned into a majestic Z. Chapter 36:13. This Z was different from Xiaohua's previous Z. It was dressed like a general, and even the appearance of this Z was somewhat similar to Jing Mubai. 3 Qi's unification. Refine the spirit back to the void. As soon as Xiaohua saw Jing Mubao's tricolored true Qi and Z, he immediately understood. Jing Mubao had not only cultivated the 3 Qis unifying the origin, but he had also refined his mind into the Z, reaching the stage of refining the mind back to the void. Moreover, when this Z appeared, Jing Mubai's absent-minded eyes immediately became clear. Even when the 2 green and red spirit execution yuan light fell on the top of this Z's head, they were stopped by the 3-colored true Qi and could not fall at all. Even so, Jing Mubao, who was lucky enough to escape, was sweating profusely on his back. He was still in a state of shock. As soon as he felt this, a sharp pain came from his back. The soaring dragon shears had taken advantage of his resistance to the spirit-slaying yuan light to cut off a large piece of his back. Damn it! Jing Mubai gritted his teeth. The 3-colored Z above his head waved its hand, and countless inscriptions fell from its hand. Jing Mubai was a military Confucian cultivator. His Z was not only dressed like a general, but also could control the inscriptions with a raise of its hand. It was somewhat similar to the Confucian cultivators of Confucianism. Cha-cha-cha. As the inscriptions in the hands of the Z smashed down, thunderbolts appeared from the clear sky around Xiaohua, flocking into Xiaohua's golden body. Boom! The thunderbolts of the Z were really powerful. Not only could it blow down the entire mountain range, but Xiaohua's golden body also collapsed along with it. However, the thing that made Jing Muxue raise her eyebrows happened again. She saw a green light flashed between Xiaohua's eyebrows, and one by one, the green seal characters that were even colder than the inscriptions appeared. Then, a spell that sounded like the whispers of the gods resounded in the air. Rumble. Layers of dense lightning appeared and fell on his golden body. Incomparable numbness came out, and the golden body collapsed in an instant. Moreover, the collapse spread rapidly, and there was no way to stop it. What kind of method is this? Has this Yaotai mountain already locked the Dao Sect's thunder drawing technique? How can this cultivator use it? Moreover, how could this lightning have anything to do with the strange characters? Jing Mubao was completely dumbfounded. Admittedly, Jing Mubao was stunned by Xiaohua's means, but his nightmare had just begun. Because under the dark green lightning, he did not know when a layer of two-colored fire net had sprouted from the bottom of his feet, rolling up from bottom to top. As soon as his golden body touched this fire net, it immediately turned into pure liquid and fell into the air. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Jing Mubao roared in succession. It was unknown whether he was scolding Xiaohua, regretting that he had carelessly lost his weapon, or scolding himself for not even preparing too many imperial weapons and scrolls. While Jing Mubao was cursing, the tricolored Z above his head suddenly flew up. His right hand clenched into a fist, and like a meteor piercing through the sun, he smashed toward Xiaohua's head with an irresistible imprisoning force. Hee. Xiaohua sneered. The green-robed Xiaohua controlled his invisible nascent soul to immediately fly out from the top of Xiaohua's head. His two hands hugged the air, and streaks of lightning slowly emerged, preparing to launch a sneak attack halfway. However, just as Xiaohua's nascent soul flew out, it immediately gave birth to a kind of indescribable warning sign. A vague, huge suction force came from the depths of the defensive formation. Although it had not yet come out, it had already locked onto Xiaohua's nascent soul. The green-robed Xiaohua shuddered. He did not have time to sneak attack Jing Mubao, and immediately urged his nascent soul to land on top of Xiaohua's head. When this nascent soul touched Xiaohua's body, the warning sign immediately disappeared, and the suction force also disappeared. Damn it! What's going on? Xiaohua turned pale with fright. It was also because of this absent-mindedness that Xiaohua immediately lost the opportunity. The Z's fist fell down. Xiaohua looked at the head that he dodged, but it was precisely his left shoulder that collapsed. Rumble! With a series of muffled sounds, Xiaohua's several hundred zhang golden body could no longer support, and slowly shrunk. Jing Mubao was also not that strong. When the Z just hit Xiaohua's golden body, Jing Mubao felt his mind become confused again, and the soul-punishing Yuan light once again had a tendency to fall. He hastily withdrew the Z, and then looked at Xiaohua, who hastily withdrew his golden body, and a trace of a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then that Z waved his hand, and a huge ball of light fell in front of him. Those two dragon-shaped figures dragged their long dragon bodies and pounced over. Jing Mubao lowered his head and looked at the fire net that he couldn't extinguish even with his noble qi. He knew that if he didn't kill Xiaohua, he wouldn't be able to escape. But he saw Jing Mubao grin. The Z above his head waved his hands, and the huge ball of light immediately divided into three under the noble qi that was sharper than the edge of a blade. Among these three balls of light, the one in the Z's hand was bigger, and the other two were smaller. Go! A majestic voice that could shake the entire defensive formation burst out from the Z's mouth. It was more ear-piercing than spring thunder. Two vast noble qi pillars emitted a huge rumbling sound as they penetrated the heaven and earth, and directly rushed into the two small balls of light. At the same time, the Z opened his mouth again, and three-colored Jin qi spurted out like a rainbow bridge, which divided into two and fell on top of the balls of light. Roar! The two dragon figures raised their huge heads. Although the dragon heads were blurry, they revealed an indescribable excitement. When the dragon heads opened, a cold and dark aura was emitted from the holes in the dragon heads. The two balls of light that were filled with Jing Mubao's condensed Jin qi fell into the dragon heads. Pa 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 pa! The originally blurry dragon heads, after the three-colored Zhenqi fell into their mouths, clearly had some color, like the finishing touch, and this color quickly spread over the dragon body. Roar! The earth shook, and the ice river and the weak wind formation were now crazily surging. Along with the swaying of the two dragon figures, an imposing aura that could suppress everything, along with the entire defensive formation, rushed towards Xiaohua. Jing Mubao smiled, and his smile was very bright. Although the fire net under his feet had not been extinguished, and although the spirit-slaying light above the head of the Z was still threatening his life, he was not the slightest bit afraid. The momentum of the two dragons playing with a pearl was the final killing move of the defensive formation. While Xiaohua was scheming against him, he was also scheming against Xiaohua. Jing Mubao had never seen a Taoist cultivator who could escape from the defensive formation of the two dragons playing with a pearl. In the previous Jade Pavilion gathering, the defensive formation of the two dragons playing with a pearl was enough to catch all the Taoist cultivators in one fell swoop. Who knows what the palace master is thinking? Today, he actually opened the 28-star arrays? The strength of this Taoist cultivator is far beyond the 4th level of Yuanli. It would be a pity to kill him. It's better to suppress him and use him for me. Jing Mubao secretly calculated. Unfortunately, there was always an accident. Just as Jing Mubao smiled, he saw a disc spit out from Xiaohua's mouth. As soon as the disc came out, it suddenly expanded. Layers of golden dragon qi gushed out from the disc, and within this dragon qi, countless images of mountains and rivers emerged. Jing Mubao was stunned. His heart gave birth to a kind of unimaginable feeling. He watched as the whole disc instantly turned into an oval-shaped imperial jade seal in the midst of the dragon qi. A terrifying aura rushed out of the imperial jade seal, causing immortals and mortals to retreat. It rushed towards Xiaohua's two dragon forms and pressed down. Suppress! Xiaohua coldly roared. Although his voice was much less dignified than the previous Z, it was still exceptionally clear and incomparably powerful. Following this voice, the two dragon figures trembled violently. The dragon qi of the mountain and river seal descended like a large hand. Regardless of whether it was the dragon head or the dragon pearl, it grabbed them all in one go. You? How can you have the national weapon? You? How can you control the national weapon? How can you control the fate of a country? Jing Mubao shouted in disbelief, and then his Z also trembled like a sieve under the suppression of the dragon qi. A sense of crisis that he had never felt before arose in his heart. Logically speaking, although the mountain and river seal was powerful, it might not be able to suppress him, a Star Lord of Star Lord Palace. However, in order to control the imperial formation of the two dragons playing with the pearl, he had fused his genuine qi with the dragon pearls. This way, although it was easy to control the imperial formation, when Xiaohua suppressed the dragon pearls and dragon figures, his Z was also suppressed. What scared Jing Mubao the most was that the dragon qi above the mountain and river seal had an irresistible force. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the two dragon mountains of Yaotai Mountain was far inferior to that of the mountain and river seal. Under the suppression of the mountain and river seal, the dragon pearls and dragon heads had been submerged. His Z also collapsed along with the dragon pearls and was about to be pulled into the mountain and river seal. Jing Mubao suddenly felt that he was at his wit's end. He did not know how to get out of this predicament safely. Go all out. Jing Mubao patted his head, and the tricolored genuine qi gushed out again. The genuine qi madly rushed into his Z, trying to stabilize his Z. Another clear dragon roar came from the mountain and river seal. At first glance, it sounded like two dragon figures struggling, but Jing Mubao knew that this was not the qi of the mountain range that he had previously controlled, because along with this dragon roar, the suction of the mountain and river seal suddenly increased several times. His Z collapsed with a loud bang, and the spirit punishment vital light took advantage of the situation to fall. Jing Mubao only had time to swing his weapon, and the spirit punishment vital light had already broken through his defense and swept past his huge neck. Puff! Blood soared into the sky, and the whole golden body fell down with a loud bang. Good. Xiao Hua's heart relaxed. He urged the spirit punishment vital light to fall again, preparing to kill Jing Mubao's spirit that had already been refined back to the void. However, before the spirit punishment vital light fell, a terrifying fluctuation came out from Jing Mubao's prostrated golden body. At the same time, the Z under the suppression of the mountain and river seal also sent out the same fluctuation. Not good. Xiao Hua was both regretful and frightened. He knew that he had not been able to completely kill Jing Mubao according to his previous plan. Jing Mubao knew that he could not escape death at the last moment, and did not hesitate to self-detonate his spirit to perish together with Xiao Hua. Although Xiao Hua's cultivation was on par with Jing Mubao's and he had many means, it was impossible for him to stop Jing Mubao's self-detonation at the same level. Chapter 36:14. Xiao Hua hastily put away the sword gourd. Ignoring the soaring dragon shears, he had Dragon Vein Xiao Hua use the mountain and river seal to block the two dragon-shaped tails in front of him. That 5th-grade star monarch's self-detonation had already arrived. Rumble! The entire defensive formation shook once again, and all the mountains and rivers within a dozen li turned into nothingness. Wave after wave of qi rushed into the sky, spreading in all directions. Xiao Hua, who was at the center of the qi waves, could no longer resist. His dragon-shaped qi was smashed into fragments, his defensive earth shields were torn apart, and clusters of protective golden light were instantly extinguished. In the end, his golden body was torn into pieces, and the brilliance of Xiao Hua's physical body was extinguished. It was like a fallen leaf drifting in the air with the waves. After the time it took to eat a meal, the entire defensive formation slowly calmed down. Originally, the defensive formation controlled by Jing Mushuan was one of the 28 star formations. It covered an area of several dozen li. As a 5th-grade star monarch, Jing Mushuan's self-detonation was equivalent to a Taoist spirit-severing cultivator. His self-detonation could cover 100 li or even several hundred li. However, in order to kill Xiao Hua, Jing Mushuan specially controlled the range of his self-detonation. Of the entire defensive formation, only the area where Xiao Hua and Jing Mushuan fought turned into nothingness. After a long while, suddenly, an arrogant and shrill laugh came from the ground. Damn it, I'm actually still alive. This rare treasure is mine. Ha! Immediately, a black and rough nascent soul cultivator flew up from the ground. His divine sense swept through the entire mountain peak, as if he was looking for the jade box that Jing Mushuan and the other nascent soul cultivators failed to snatch before his death. Just as this cultivator released his divine sense, 5 different divine senses appeared in the mountain range. These 6 divine senses suddenly collided in the air. Then, 5 nascent soul cultivators with tattered Taoist robes rushed into the air from different hiding places. The 6 of them stood still in midair like trapped beasts, their faces still in shock. More than a dozen nascent soul cultivators had fallen into the defensive formation, and only a few of them had been killed in the fierce battle. The others were only injured, but Jing Mu's self-detonation had almost killed all of the nascent soul cultivators who were seriously injured. Although the remaining 6 nascent soul cultivators had managed to escape, it appeared that they had also suffered significant losses. Reverend Yuan Qing and Reverend Xiangtian each stood at a corner. Their faces also carried the same expression of luck. They had already realized that everything was part of Xiao Hua's plan when Xiao Hua suddenly attacked and killed Jing Mubai. Especially Taoist Yuan Qing, who had some understanding of Xiao Hua, immediately understood that the fight between the two would not end well. He made a decision almost instantaneously, giving up on snatching the rare treasure in the jade box and fleeing into the distance as soon as possible, away from the place where the two were fighting. Although Reverend Xiangtian was arrogant, he was also alert. He had been paying attention to Reverend Yuan Qing, who was hostile to him. When he saw Reverend Yuan Qing give up the rare treasure, although he was extremely unwilling, he also fled, as far as possible from Xiao Hua and the others. Even though the two of them had reacted early, they were still injured by Jing Mubai's dying strike. After escaping the calamity and coming out again, each of them had different feelings. Taoist Xiangtian felt both lucky and ecstatic. It could be said that he had survived a double calamity. He had formed a personal grudge with Xiaohua. He even considered killing Xiaohua with the power of wind and thunder after leaving the Imperial Formation or the Jade Pavilion gathering. Now, seeing that Xiaohua's means were even more powerful than the Star Monarch guarding the formation, Taoist Xiangtian shuddered. He really didn't dare to imagine the result if he dealt with Xiaohua. Who would live and who would die? Fortunately, this guy perished together with the Guardian Star, so I didn't have to worry about it. This is Xiaohua's remains? Just as Reverend Xiangtian was rejoicing, his divine sense swept over and suddenly found an abnormally damaged body. This body was covered in a blood-stained Taoist robe, and there was not a single piece of undamaged flesh on the body. Those tightly closed slender eyes, and that deathly pale face without any color of blood, wasn't this Xiaohua, who had shocked Reverend Xiangtian greatly? Not good. This guy is still breathing. As soon as Reverend Xiangtian discovered Xiaohua's corpse, he immediately became frightened and couldn't help but steal glances at the other cultivators. Fortunately, Reverend Yuan Qing and the other cultivators were taking pills, and the places where the jade box could be located were all swept by their spiritual sense. Therefore, no one discovered Xiaohua's corpse. If this guy is allowed to recover, wouldn't this old man's previous plan be for naught? If this guy is allowed to come back to life, how can this old man still have a share of the rare treasure in the jade box? Moreover, if Reverend Yuan Qing knew that Xiaohua was not dead, wouldn't he immediately save him? The favor of saving a 5th-grade essence chi cultivator, I'm afraid he won't be able to repay it in his lifetime. Reverend Xiangtian's heart could not help but violently beat. Moreover, Xiaohua just killed the Star Monarch guarding the formation. His magic treasure, and his nascent soul. He even took the Star Monarch guarding the formation. Damn, this is comparable to the rare treasure in the jade box. With this thought, Reverend Xiangtian's right hand trembled slightly, and the damaged flying sword in his hand could not help but let out a low sword hum. However, just as Xiangtian was tempted, he hesitated again. After all, before this, Xiaohua had already used a trick to deceive the heavens. As early as when he entered the formation, he pretended to be injured by Jing Muxiao's python spear, luring Jing Muxiao into a trap. Who knew if Xiaohua was using another trick at this time? However, Xiaohua's body fluttered down and crashed into a mountain peak. The collapsed mountain peak blocked Xiaohua's fall. Xiaohua's body rolled a few times on the mountain peak. His body was covered with a lot of dust. Even the rocks on the mountain peak gradually rolled down and slid off Xiaohua's body. There were also traces of blood on the rocks after they slid off Xiaohua's body. Seeing this, Taoist Xiangtian immediately understood that Xiaohua must have fainted. Even the nascent soul in Xiaohua's body must have been knocked out by Jing Mubai's self-detonation. If he didn't take advantage of this opportunity to kill Xiaohua, even if Xiaohua didn't wake up, as long as the nascent soul caught its breath, it would definitely attract Taoist Yuan Qing's attention. However, Reverend Xiangtian still underestimated the vigilance of Reverend Yuan Qing and the other nascent soul cultivators. Although the other 5 were taking pills, the sword hum in Reverend Xiangtian's hand caused them to raise their heads. Sage Xiangtian coldly snorted and swept his gaze across the crowd. The flying sword in his hand moved, and a not-so-brilliant sword light soared into the sky, fiercely stabbing towards the heart of Xiaohua, who had landed on the cliff in the distance. Everyone was stunned and hurriedly looked in that direction. 2 cultivators raised their hands and were about to release their magic treasures. Everyone thought that Reverend Xiangtian had discovered the Imperial Jade Seal and hurriedly attacked. However, when they saw that Reverend Xiangtian was attacking Xiaohua's body with their eyes and spiritual sense, they were stunned. After all, in their hearts, Xiaohua should have died a long time ago. Reverend Yuan Qing was also stunned. The flying halberd was like the magic treasures of the other nascent soul cultivators and stopped in midair. Without the restriction of the defensive formation, a nascent soul cultivator was no different from a fierce tiger with wings. Taoist Xiangtian took the initiative to attack, and with Taoist Yuanqing's hesitation, the meteor-like lightning had already pierced Xiaohua's chest. An indescribable expression appeared on Reverend Yuanqing's face. He pointed his finger and was about to retrieve the halberd. He knew that even if he and Reverend Xiangtian attacked together, they wouldn't be able to snatch it away. Rather than offending Reverend Xiangtian for no reason, it would be better to wait for an opportunity to escape. Although Reverend Xiangtian's expression didn't change, his heart was still clenched. He was afraid that something would happen again. Seeing that Reverend Yuanqing no longer tried to stop him and that the flying sword was about to reach Xiaohua, Reverend Xiangtian's heart dropped. After all, they were so close that even if Xiaohua was in perfect condition, he would still be seriously injured. He already had the advantage against Xiaohua. People with ulterior motives will always encounter ghosts. Just as the flying sword was about to pierce Xiaohua's chest, an iron rod suddenly appeared in front of Xiaohua. Moreover, the iron rod suddenly expanded and blocked the flying sword with a flick of a finger. Clang! A loud noise rang out, and sparks flew everywhere. The flying sword pierced the iron staff and unexpectedly let out a mournful cry. A cluster of sword light scattered out like cold plum blossoms, falling in defeat in front of Xiaohua. Ah! Reverend Xiangtian was stunned. He was familiar with this iron staff. Wasn't it the same staff that Xiaohua was holding before? Moreover, at this moment, Xiangtian's heart turned to ashes. Deceiving the heavens, 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 deceiving. Seeing that Xiaohua's face was somewhat dirty and messy, like the eyes of a morning star, Reverend Xiangtian hurriedly circulated his magic power. At this moment, a strange golden light flew over from the side. The frightened Reverend Xiangtian didn't even have time to defend. The golden light cut through Reverend Xiangtian's waist in the blink of an eye, causing blood to spurt out. Reverend Xiangtian looked down in disbelief at the blood that was slowly flowing out of his body. Above his head, a bright light flashed and a 6-foot-tall Yuanqing appeared. It was holding a small sword in its hand and wearing a small soft armor. As soon as this Yuanqing appeared, its body flashed with light. It simply didn't want to face anyone and hid itself in the void. It wanted to teleport away. Xiaohua's face was as calm as water as he stood up. The sword gourd flew out of the space and covered Taoist Master Xiangtian's Yuanqing. The green and red spirit-slaying Yuan light rushed out, preparing to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. However, before the spirit-slaying origin light could fly out, a white mist appeared in the sky. Within the mist, an aura that caused all the cultivators to suffocate came from the nascent soul. A majestic pillar of aura descended from the sky and covered the nascent soul. The majestic pillar of aura was so solid that the spirit-slaying origin light couldn't land on the nascent soul. Even the nascent soul, which was originally in a daze, woke up. However, after waking up, the nascent soul was even more afraid because the majestic pillar of aura had dragged it out of the sky. Chapter 36:15. Gigi. Reverend Xiangtian's nascent soul let out a mournful cry. The runes on his body flashed chaotically as he struggled with all his might. However, amidst the rumbling of the vast aura, everyone could only see the shock on his nascent soul's face. Soon after, his nascent soul was blasted into the fog by the vast aura and disappeared. Rumble. The sound of thunder rang out again. Xiaohua's face was gloomy as he used the lightning escape technique to chase after the pillar of boundless qi. Seeing the nascent soul being sucked into the void by the pillar of boundless qi, Xiaohua hurriedly pointed at the space between his eyebrows and opened his Dharma eye. He saw a crack that was like a crack slowly closing. Then, his eyes were filled with boundless waves. These waves were endless. He didn't know where they came from, nor did he know where they were going. Damn it. Xiaohua clenched his teeth. After killing Jing Mubao, he ambushed Reverend Xiangtian in order to eliminate the danger. He didn't want to leave Yaotai Mountain and be troubled by Fairy Xiangfeng. Who would have thought that in the end, he would fail on the verge of success? This vast aura, what is the meaning of this? Is Reverend Xiangtian dead or alive? Xiaohua closed his magic eye and held his chin. He looked at the sky and the mess below him and began to ponder. Reverend Xiao. A slightly cautious and respectful voice sounded. Xiaohua looked up and saw that it was Reverend Yuan Qing who was closest to him. At this moment, Reverend Yuan Qing's face was filled with an indescribable awkwardness and bitterness. Xiaohua had pretended to injure him twice, and he had ignored both times. Previously, he had said very well in front of Xiaohua that they would work together. How could his actions convince Reverend Yuan Qing? The other 4 nascent soul cultivators all stood behind Reverend Yuan Qing. Similarly, their previous arrogance was restrained. Facing a Tao sect senior who had broken the Star Lord Great Formation by himself, they didn't have the qualifications to be arrogant. The most important thing was that the Teng Jiao shears that killed Reverend Xiangtian was still floating in the air. No one knew if it would fall on their necks or not. Xiaohua's face didn't show any anger, nor did he have any intention of scolding them. Instead, he looked at them and said, "The formation has been broken. You all go to the Jade Box and see if there are any other rare treasures near the mountain range." Yes, this junior understands. Although Taoist Master Yuan Qing's cultivation was not the highest among the 5, he was, after all, familiar with Xiaohua. He hurriedly bowed and agreed. Then he discussed with the other 4 in a low voice. In a moment, the 5 of them spread out in 5 different directions, releasing their divine senses to slowly search. Xiaohua looked at the backs of the 5 people. With a wave of his hand, the Teng Jiao shears appeared in his hand. Looking at the golden half of the Teng Jiao shears, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. His current strength was comparable to the spirit-severing stage, but the magic treasure in his hand was not strong enough. Currently, he could only use the soaring WRM scissors, the ocean-overturning seal, the spirit-slaying light, and the icefall mirror. Of these 4 magic treasures, only the ocean-overturning seal was complete. The other 3 were incomplete. The spirit extermination vital light had yet to be successfully refined, and the soaring dragon scissors and the ice deadly mirror were damaged and incomplete. Although Xiaohua now had the means to refine spirit treasures, he still couldn't decide which magic treasure to refine into his life source magic treasure. Compared to the damaged soaring dragon scissors and the ice deadly mirror, the ocean-overturning seal's power was slightly lacking. It was not even comparable to the wishful staff. However, if he were to refine the soaring dragon scissors and the ice deadly mirror into spirit treasures, Xiaohua felt that it was inappropriate. It could even be said that it was not worth it. Previously, Xiaohua's main goal was to refine the 5 elements wishful staff, but after much effort, he discovered that what he was refining was only the heaven-leveling staff. Now, he had finally obtained the main material for the refining of the 5 elements wishful heaven cudgel. However, it was a huge task to refine it. It was definitely not something he could complete now. This made Xiaohua feel as if he was drawing water with a bamboo basket. It's difficult. Xiaohua sighed. With a turn of his hand, he put the soaring dragon scissors into the space. Then, with a move of his finger, he took out the sword gourd. Now, the sword gourd was extremely powerful. Even Jing Mulong was buried under the spirit extermination vital light. However, there was another problem with the spirit extermination vital light that was difficult to solve. That was, the sword light was not very sharp. Not to mention Jing Mulong, who was a 5th grade elemental power, even Reverend Xiangtian and Leng Qingge, who were 4th grade elemental power, could withstand it. Of course, Xiaohua also knew that the extreme magnetic light was the key to refining the spirit extermination vital light, but he couldn't find the extreme magnetic light. How can a spirit treasure be easy to refine? Looking at the sword gourd, Xiaohua's heart gave birth to a realization. Although this Zhao's magic treasures are not very useful, they are gradually being perfected. When the opportunity comes, this Zhao's spirit treasure will be earth-shattering, right? The ancients often say that haste makes waste. This is probably the case. After putting away the sword gourd, Xiaohua released his divine sense and looked around at the 5 nascent soul cultivators who were searching for him. Then he released his soul awareness to search for Su Tingzi's location. Compared to Reverend Yuan Qing, Xiaohua cared more about Su Tingzi. After all, Su Tingzi had received Xiaohua's instructions to use him as bait to lure Jing Mulong out. Xiaohua would remember this favor. After looking for a moment, Xiaohua recalled a little, identified a direction, and flew in a certain direction. Then, he released his Buddhist awareness to look around. As he looked, Xiaohua couldn't help but be moved. Then, his figure flashed and he entered the ground. After a moment, he flew out again. In his hand, he was holding an earth-yellow magic treasure that was several feet in size. This earth-yellow magic treasure was Su Tingzi's heaven-shaking hammer. Gently placing the heaven-shaking hammer on the ground, Xiaohua stretched out his index finger. At the tip of his finger, a similarly earthy yellow light landed on the heaven-shaking hammer like a sharp thorn. The heaven-shaking hammer let out a soft rumble and slowly retracted. It returned to the size of a palm and landed in Xiaohua's hand. Looking at the ground now, it was a rather tragic sight. Inside, Su Tingzi's face was yellow and his eyes were tightly shut. Just as he moved his eyeballs, he opened his eyelids with difficulty. Of the nearly 20 golden core cultivators behind him, only 9 were alive. The other 10 had already turned into broken limbs. Even though these 9 people were still alive, Xiaohua's Buddha's consciousness had already swept over them. He had already found out that these 9 people were already seriously injured. Not only had their corporeal bodies been damaged, but even their golden cores had also been shattered. If they didn't take the spirit pills as soon as possible, then they would die in less than 2 hours. Taoist Master Xiao. Su Tingzi opened his eyes and saw that it was Xiaohua. Joy appeared on his face. He forced a smile and said, "I didn't disappoint you." Xiaohua nodded. "Fellow Taoists, righteousness is something that I will remember in my heart. Not only did you help me lure out the star monarch guarding the array, you even protected the 9 golden core disciples. Although you were heavily injured, their lives were saved." Su Tingzi slowly sat up and looked at the 9 golden core cultivators. He sighed and said, "Their lives are saved for now, but they will die sooner or later. I was moved by Taoist Master Xiao and became a good person for once." Xiaohua said with a smile, "Good people will be rewarded. Fellow Taoist, you didn't care about your own safety and used your natal magic treasure to protect them. How can I let them die?" Su Tingzi's eyes flashed with surprise. He said anxiously, "Taoist? Taoist Master Xiao, do you have the 9 revolutions life-extending pill?" Xiaohua was sweating profusely. He waved his hand and said, "I don't have that kind of spirit item, but I have other medicinal pills." As he spoke, he first handed the heaven-shaking hammer to Su Tingzi. Then, he took out a few medicinal pills and handed them to him. He said with a smile, "Try this medicinal pill of mine." Su Tingzi naturally knew that this wasn't the time to be polite. He put away his magic treasure and took out a medicinal pill and put it in his mouth. Su Tingzi's face was filled with ecstasy as soon as the medicinal pill entered his mouth. He immediately closed his eyes and started to circulate his cultivation. Xiaohua hurriedly said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. There are still 9 golden core disciples who need your help. I have to circulate my cultivation and don't have time to help them. Although they made a blood oath to me, they made a blood oath to Taoist Master Xiao. I'll have to trouble Taoist Master Xiao with their matters." Su Tingzi still hadn't recovered from his injuries, so how could he care about others? He closed his eyes and circulated his cultivation. When Xiaohua saw this, he didn't dare to delay any longer. He took out the medicinal pills and fed them to the 9 golden core cultivators one by one. Then he poured his true essence into the 9 people's mouths to help them dissolve the medicinal effects. Xiaohua's medicinal pills were very powerful. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the 9 people woke up at almost the same time. When they saw the smiling Xiaohua and Su Tingzi, who was sitting cross-legged at the side, they immediately understood what had happened. They all struggled to get up and kneeled. No need to be so polite. Xiaohua hurriedly pressed the 9 people down and said, "You're all heavily injured. It wasn't easy for me to save you with my medicinal pills. If you move any more, my medicinal pills will be wasted." Junior Pan Yu thanks Senior Xiao for his kindness. The golden core cultivator in front looked left and right. An indescribable bitterness appeared on his face as he clasped his hands and said with difficulty. The several gold core cultivators also reported their names one by one and thanked Xiaohua. Xiaohua nodded slightly. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Pan Yu, not only are your physical bodies heavily injured, even your golden cores are shattered. Now that you're on Yaota Mountain, your lives could fall at any time. What do you plan to do?" This. Pan Yu looked at Su Tingzi, who had his eyes closed, and said in a low voice, "Junior and the others have already sworn a blood oath to serve Senior Su Tingzi. Don't worry about me. I can't even take care of myself right now. I'll transfer your blood oath to Taoist Master Xiao." Su Tingzi didn't open his eyes and said in a low voice, "Besides, I was just following Taoist Master Zhao's orders at that time to lure the Confucian cultivators into a trap." Su Tingzi's voice was extremely low, but the golden core cultivators heard it clearly. Wasn't that the situation at that time? However, Pan Yu and the others seemed to have never heard of a blood oath being transferred to someone else. They couldn't help but look at each other. Xiaohua looked at the 9 late-stage golden core cultivators and rolled his eyes. He nodded and said, "Since fellow Taoist Su Tingzi has the heart, then I can't be careless. If you're willing to serve me loyally, I can naturally protect your lives. As long as I can walk out of Yaota Mountain, I'll definitely bring you out. Moreover, I can also guarantee your future cultivation, including cultivation methods, medicinal pills, and other things." Chapter 36:16. Thank you, Senior. We are willing to pledge our loyalty to Senior. Pan Yu and the others were overjoyed. Being able to pledge their loyalty to someone as powerful as Xiaohua naturally brought them many benefits. However, Xiaohua frowned again and said with difficulty, "But the problem is that even if this old man wants to protect all of you, there are still many defensive formations in the Jade Pavilion gathering. Even if all of you stay close to this old man doesn't have much confidence, Senior." A golden core cultivator saw that Xiaohua was in a difficult position and said in a low voice, "Senior, don't you have the nation treasure? That thing can be used to suppress cultivators of our generation, so it can naturally contain us. It won't be too late to let us out after Senior leaves the Jade Pavilion conference." In fact, Xiaohua originally wanted to let them enter his Qingquan bag or spirit storage bag, but after hearing this golden core cultivator's words, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He nodded and said, "All right, then I'll have to trouble you all." Taoist Master Xiao. Su Tingzi opened his eyes and hurriedly called out, "You should also suppress I. Why do I feel like I won't be able to last until the Jade Pavilion conference ends with my injuries?" "That's fine," Xiaohua said with a smile. "As long as fellow Taoist doesn't worry, I can enter." Su Tingzi's words were half a joke. After all, once he entered the mountain and river seal, his entire life would be in Xiaohua's hands. No matter what Xiaohua did to him, he wouldn't be able to resist. However, when Su Tingzi heard Xiaohua's straightforward answer and thought about his impression of Xiaohua in this short period of time, he couldn't help but be tempted. After Xiaohua finished speaking with Su Tingzi, he raised his hand and took out 9 medicinal pills. He handed them to Pan Yu and the others and said, "These are the medicinal pills that I used before. They should be able to help you all condense your golden cores. Take them now, and after I put you all into the mountain and river seal, you can take advantage of this time to cultivate." Condense golden cores? Pan Yu and the others could not believe their ears. They all carefully received the mountain river seal and hurriedly put it into the air. Xiaohua did not hold back and had Dragon Vein Xiaohua use the mountain river seal to suppress the 9 people inside. Su Tingzi was moved. Although Xiaohua didn't say who refined this pill, Su Tingzi had never heard of any famous alchemist in the hidden immortal continent who could refine this legendary pill. Even if Xiaohua didn't know how to refine pills, If Xiaohua was able to get acquainted with this kind of person, he would definitely be able to gain some benefits if he befriended Xiaohua. Therefore, without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Su Tingzi took the initiative and said with a smile, "Taoist Master Xiao, there is also I, don't forget. Is fellow Taoist really willing?" Xiaohua smiled meaningfully. "I thought fellow Taoist was just joking." "Sai, didn't Taoist Master Xiao say it already? Good people have good karma. I just did a good deed. Spiritual Master, you should let I have a good karma, right?" Su Tingzi blinked his eyes and smiled. When Xiaohua heard this, he nodded solemnly and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I won't disappoint you." "Many thanks, Taoist Master Xiao." Ever since Su Tingzi woke up, he had been calling Xiaohua Taoist Master Xiao instead of fellow Taoist Xiao. Dragon Vein Xiaohua activated the mountain and river seal. Just as he was about to put Su Tingzi away, Su Tingzi suddenly shouted, "Taoist Master Xiao, please wait." Xiaohua said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "Fellow Taoist, are you regretting it?" Su Tingzi waved his hand. "Previously, inside the defensive formation, I saw two strange things. Now that I suddenly remembered, I have to remind Taoist Master. Fellow Taoist, please speak." Xiaohua was bewildered. After hearing Su Tingzi talk about the two nascent soul cultivators' nascent souls disappearing after their deaths, he asked again, then, "Fellow Taoist, do you know if such strange things happened in the Jade Pavilion gathering?" Su Tingzi shook his head slightly. "I don't know. However, from what I know, it doesn't seem to be the case. Of course, it's said that there are many defensive formations in the Jade Pavilion gathering, and every defensive formation is different. Perhaps the defensive formation we fell into is different from the others. And I understand. I'll pay attention." Xiaohua temporarily suppressed his doubts and said, "Fellow Taoist, you should go back and cultivate." As he spoke, he activated the mountain and river seal and suppressed Su Tingzi. After putting everyone away, Xiaohua looked at the mountain and river seal in his hand and smiled. This mountain and river seal was actually a bit similar to a cosmos bag, but the space inside was much larger. Putting people into a cosmos bag sounded very disgusting, but if it was put into the mountain and river seal, it sounded more comfortable. However, in reality, what was the difference? It wasn't as comfortable as his own space. A nation weapon, a nation weapon. A nation weapon, how interesting. Xiaohua spun the mountain and river seal in his hand and put it back into his meridians. He looked up at the clear sky and muttered, "Damn it, Li wanted me to keep a low profile, but I broke a Celestial Lord's defensive formation as soon as I arrived and even killed a Celestial Lord. How can I keep a low profile in the future? Now that the defensive formation is broken and the Celestial Lord is dead, Kong Hongwu will fly into a rage. I really don't know what methods he'll use to deal with me. It seems that he won't rest until he's dead. It's time for me to change my appearance." On the Jade Mountain within the Celestial Lord Palace, there was a huge space. Kong Hongwu was standing in the starry sky with his hands behind his back. Behind Kong Hongwu were a boy and a girl. They each held a flute and a sword in their hands as they stood there respectfully. However, the two boys' gazes were different from Kong Hongwu's. Kong Hongwu narrowed his eyes as if he had a card up his sleeve. As for the two boys, they looked at the starry sky below them without blinking, their faces filled with anticipation. The stars in the starry sky were dazzling, and each star flickered with a different brilliance. Aside from the ordinary brilliance, there was also a faint mist. This mist was either like a thin thread or like cotton. It was actually different. However, if one looked carefully, they would be able to see the strangeness of the starry sky. Although there were many formations in the starry sky, they were sparse. It was far from being as dense as the real starry sky. Moreover, there were only a few dozen stars that could be considered dense. The brilliance of these stars linked together, and they were either shaped like a rooster or a black bear. It was very dazzling. If Xiaohua was here, he would definitely be able to tell that there were exactly 28 stars in these dozens of spots. They were the 28 lunar mansions. There was another special place in the starry sky. Under the starry sky, there was something that looked like a long river. This thing seemed to hold up the entire starry sky. Above the long river, there were layers of purple clouds. Between the layers, there were mountains, ridges, long rivers, streams, and so on. Occasionally, the shadows of cities and farmhouses could be seen. Suddenly, on a star that was not shining brightly, a small light dust fell like a meteor. This light dust fell into the long river under the starry sky. At the same time, a thin white line rushed out from the long river and caught the light dust. When the light dust fell into the long river, it did not cause any splashes. 35. The girl was quick to speak and hurriedly shouted, "Palace Master, 35 have already appeared." Kong Hongwu faintly replied. His brows slightly furrowed as if he was not very happy. The girl's pearl-like eyes turned slightly and she smiled. "Palace Master, what is this thing? How come I have not seen it in the previous Jade Pavilion conference? It's really fun." "Hee fun?" Kong Hongwu opened his eyes and a smile appeared on his face. He said, "In this world, the most beautiful thing is to sit and watch the clouds rise and fall. The most calming thing is to wait for the flowers to bloom and wilt. In this world, the most satisfying thing is to control the life and death of others." The two children were dumbfounded. They looked at each other and did not know what to say. The boy thought for a moment and asked, "Palace Master, when the Dragon Gate was opened, I saw the Taoist rush into the Dragon Gate. Why did he participate in the Jade Pavilion conference? Did he think that the reward from Palace Master was not enough and came to my Jade Mountain to pick spirit herbs? He is really too greedy." Hearing the mention of the Taoist, a layer of anger appeared on Kong Hongwu's face. He slightly nodded and said, "Yes, he is indeed too greedy. Little Yun, remember, people die for wealth and birds die for food. This is an old saying that describes human greed. Since ancient times, who knows how many people have died because of this sentence? Little Huoda is not walking the Dragon Gate, it is a dead end. Don't be greedy in the future." The boy named Little Yun hurriedly bowed and said, "Yes, Palace Master, I will remember. I can get whatever I want in front of Palace Master, I won't be greedy." Kong Hongwu smiled and looked at Little Yun. "You are still young, how can you know how big the temptation of this world is? Do you think those Dao sect cultivators who came to participate in the Jade Pavilion conference don't know the disadvantages of greed? Do you think they didn't say such words in the past? Greed is the biggest enemy in life. Palace Master, look, there is a lot of light dust falling." While speaking, the girl jumped up and clapped her hands, saying, "So beautiful, just like fireworks." Kong Hongwu raised his head and looked. Sure enough, there was a snake-shaped star flashing with extremely brilliant brilliance. Under that brilliance, dozens of light dust fell one after another. Above the long river, there was a rushing filament that pulled these light dust into the river. Kong Hongwu unconsciously showed a satisfied smile on his face. There is also that one. Little Yun was not to be outdone. He also pointed at a tiger-like star and shouted, "And there are more fireworks, more beautiful." Before the little girl could take it out, the starry sky was filled with specks of light dust. There were more and less specks of light dust, and they were exceptionally bright. This caused the corners of Kong Hongwu's mouth to curl up again, and he looked very proud. But when Kong Hongwu slightly lowered his head and was about to squint his eyes, suddenly, at the place where the previous star was, the whole star rushed out a few feet of starlight. Near the star, there was a dragon-shaped star river that fiercely rotated and crashed into the star. Chapter 36:17. Shangguanyi ran? Jing Mu Xian? Seeing this strange scene, Kong Hongwu was shocked. He hurriedly unfolded his robe, and his eyes flashed with 3 colors of clear light. Hua! There was a sound like falling into water, and the whole star collapsed. The brilliant starlight instantly dimmed, and as the starlight was annihilated, several light dust fell again. What's going on? Kong Hongwu was inexplicably surprised. This Jing Mu Xian star formation was broken by someone? How is this possible? The four eyes of the boy and girl rolled around, and there was panic and fear on their faces. Obviously, they knew the seriousness of the matter, so they closed their little mouths tightly and didn't dare to breathe loudly. Kong Hongwu stared at the starry sky formation, as if he was thinking about something. After a long while, he looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had understood something, and said, "Ha, Hongmeng, old man, you're really good. It seems that you want to make an example of my Star Lord Palace. I really underestimated you. When I saw your subordinates leave, I thought you didn't dare to come to Yaodai Mountain to make trouble, but I didn't expect you to send Xiao Hua to make trouble. Good, 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 I'm not your opponent, but I'll cut off your claws and teeth. I'll let you know the power of my Star Lord Palace." After saying that, Kong Hongwu raised his hand, and the sword in Xiao Yun's hand flew up with a clang and landed in the starry sky. Kong Hongwu patted his own head and puff. 3 colored air columns spurted out and condensed into a Z in the air. Except for the abnormal skin color, this Z was also dressed in a Confucian robe and looked like a real person. This Yi stretched out his hand, and the sword fell into his hand. Immediately, jumping inscriptions flew out from the sword, and the inscriptions made a clear chanting sound. The chanting sound was full of rhythm, and strands of noble qi, which were as thin as hair but condensed with terrifying power, came out of the void and crashed into the inscriptions. Layers of extraordinary splendor mixed with clouds gushed out from the surface of the inscriptions. In the time it took to eat a meal, the inscriptions on the whole sword rushed into the air and condensed into the appearance of a golden-armored celestial man. "Please." Kong Hongwu lightly opened his mouth and spat out a word. Thousands of rays of light flew out of the Z's mouth and landed on the forehead of the golden-armored celestial man. The rays of light converged and turned into the inscriptions of the sun, moon, and star. Then the Z waved his hand and pointed the sword at the center of the 3 inscriptions. The golden-armored celestial man flashed with an intense golden light and rushed into the starry sky. Boom! With a soft sound, the golden-armored celestial man disappeared. At the same time, a blood-red star with a long tail flew out from where the golden-armored celestial man disappeared. On top of the star, there were shadows of the sun and moon that were flashing with different colors of clouds. Xiao Hua retracted his gaze from the horizon and released his Buddhist sense to check the area again. He didn't find anyone alive. Only then did he fly to the place where Reverend Xiangtian was killed. Reverend Xiangtian's corpse had been split into 2 and looked very bloody. Xiao Hua waved his hand and a samadhi true fire fell and burned the corpse. He then raised his hand and took a few Qingkuan bags. Xiao Hua opened them and looked inside. There were many things inside. Xiao Hua didn't have time to look at them carefully and casually threw them into his space. Taoist Xiang Tian's cold plum flying sword was also thrown to the ground. However, this sword was Taoist Xiang Tian's life treasure. Since Taoist Xiang Tian's nascent soul was holding a small sword, even if Xiao Hua erased the origin soul imprint on it, it wouldn't be of much use. However, Xiao Hua only hesitated for a moment. He raised his hand and the cold plum sword fell into his hand. Without the slightest hesitation, he erased the nascent divinity within it and put it away. A magic treasure painstakingly refined by a nascent soul cultivator could definitely be given to an ordinary core formation disciple. It's here, it's here. At this moment, a cultivator's hoarse voice sounded. Xiao Hua looked up and saw that it was one of the cultivators that Taoist Yuan Qing sent to search for the jade box. Xiao Hua urged his body to fly towards that person. The other 4 people also stopped searching and flew towards that person's location. When Xiao Hua arrived, that person had already taken out the jade box from the collapsed mountain rocks. This place was already very far from the cliff where the jade box was previously placed. Moreover, the surrounding mountain rocks, debris, and fallen ancient trees were all present. It was really a mess. From time to time, there would be some fog, weak wind, and other things rushing out. If one didn't look carefully, it would really be difficult to find it. That person was slightly thin and his face was pale. When he saw Xiao Hua fly over, he hurriedly handed over the jade box and said with a smile, "Senior Xiao, Xiaohua glanced at the jade box and said indifferently, "Wait a moment. Let's wait for them to arrive." Yes, that person didn't dare to say anything else. He held the jade box in his hand and stood in the air. Seeing that Taoist Yuan Qing and the others still hadn't arrived, Xiaohua asked again, "How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" "Senior Xiao, you're too polite." "I'm Taoist Jingting." Taoist Jingting was flattered when he heard Xiaohua call him fellow Taoist. "You found this thing, so it should be yours. However, I need the Imperial Preceptor's lot. If it's the lot of the Imperial Preceptor, then it belongs to me." Xiaohua said, "However, I'll give you some compensation." "I wouldn't dare." Taoist Jingting said hurriedly, "With Senior's ability, finding this thing is as easy as lifting a finger. It's my honor to be of service to Senior. Even if it's the 3 treasures mentioned by Star-Lord Palace, I'm willing to offer them to Senior." Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment, somewhat puzzled. He rubbed his chin, embarrassed by his own deterrence. Although he was somewhat puzzled when he saw Xiaohua, Taoist Jingting didn't explain much when he saw Taoist Yuan Qing and the others flying over. He just waited quietly on the side. When Taoist Yuan Qing saw the jade box in Taoist Jingting's hand, a smile immediately appeared on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Congratulations, Senior." "Hee, congratulations, congratulations." Xiaohua nodded slightly. Taoist Yuan Qing took out a few more jade boxes from his bosom and handed them to Xiaohua, saying, "Also, these are some spiritual herbs and spiritual objects that Junior found nearby. Senior saved Junior's life. Junior has nothing to repay Senior, so I'll take these as my thanks to Senior." Xiaohua took a deep look at Taoist Yuan Qing and didn't refuse. He took them with a smile and said, "Since that's the case, I'll accept these things. Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, you don't have to keep talking about your so-called kindness. I'll listen to Taoist Zhao's instructions." Taoist Yuan Qing was very happy. After answering respectfully, he stood to the side. Xiaohua understood, so how could the other 3 nascent soul cultivators not understand? They all took out a few jade boxes from their Qiankuan bags. Who knew if they found them in such a short time? They all handed them to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took them one by one without hesitation. He roughly looked at them and sent them into his space. Then he looked at Taoist Jingting and said, "I've always liked to be magnanimous. Although I didn't say it clearly and only asked you to help me find the jade boxes, the things inside the jade boxes." Soon after, Xiaohua repeated what he had just said to Taoist Master Jingting. Only then did he order Taoist Master Jingting to open the jade box. Inside the jade box, there was a flash of brilliance, and a faint, mighty roar of a beast rushed into the air along with the jade box. Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a happy expression. He could already clearly see that under that brilliance, there was a swan wand-shaped imperial jade seal. "Congratulations, Taoist Xiao." Taoist Jingting also slightly closed his eyes because of that light, and then he shouted with a happy expression, "Ah!" Seeing that it was the state preceptor's lot that he needed, Xiaohua didn't hold back. He covered his Taoist robe, and the state preceptor's lot fell into his hand, instantly disappearing. Taoist Yuan Qing and the other 4 nascent soul cultivators also opened their mouths to congratulate him, but the smiles on their faces carried a trace of bitterness. More than 10 nascent soul cultivators risked their lives, and so many of them died. Who would have thought that the jade boxes only contained the state preceptor's lot? How could they not feel wronged? Of course, their congratulations were sincere. After all, the state preceptor's lot wasn't what they wanted, and Xiaohua taking it wouldn't make them feel pained. Xiaohua received the state preceptor's lot, and this trip was complete. Then he asked with a smile, "I've already achieved my goal of participating in the Jadestage meeting. I'm not going to go any further. I'll just wait here until the Jadestage meeting is over and leave. Fellow Taoists, if you still have other ideas, feel free to go." Taoist Master Xiao. The somewhat short nascent soul cultivator said regretfully, "With your skills, how can you stay here? Not to mention that any one of those 3 treasures is useful to you, Even the spiritual grasses and spiritual items in other places of the Jadestige Mountain are incomparable to other places of the hidden immortal continent. Don't you want to get one or two? Xiao Hua said with a smile that wasn't a smile. If I were to snatch those 3 treasures, wouldn't you all be empty-handed? Those things are useless to me, so I'll leave them for you. The short nascent soul cultivator's face was somewhat embarrassed, and he said in a low voice, since Taoist isn't willing to go forward, then this junior will take his leave first. If Taoist has time in the future, please come to Pinyu Lake. This junior will welcome you with open arms. You can go. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said to Taoist Master Yuan Qing, Taoist Master Jing Ting, and the others. However, just as he finished speaking, he immediately thought of something and hurriedly said, "Oh, don't worry, I just remembered something. I don't know which fellow Taoist can help me?" When the short nascent soul cultivator heard this, his face was very happy. He had the same thoughts as the others. They all wanted to follow Xiao Hua. This way, even if they encountered any danger, they could ask Xiao Hua for help. However, they didn't expect that Xiao Hua didn't intend to go forward at all. At this time, hearing Xiao Hua's words, the cultivator hurriedly said, "I don't know what Taoist master wants to do." "Oh, it's nothing. I just want to ask you, who knows about the heavenly soul, earthly soul, and mortal essence?" Xiao Hua said with a smile. Chapter 36:18. When the short nascent soul cultivator heard this, he couldn't help but stare blankly. Looking at the 3 people beside him, they all looked confused. He slightly shook his head and said, "I have never heard of it." No matter. Xiao Hua smiled and waved his hand. "If you don't know, then don't know." At this moment, Taoist Jingting said calmly, "I know what Taoist Jingting is talking about. Moreover, I also know that there is one in Yaota Mountain." "Is that so?" Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised. He looked at Taoist Jingting and said with a smile, "If fellow Taoist can help me, I definitely won't treat you unfairly." Taoist Jingting seemed to have made some decision. He lightly bit his lips and said, "Taoist Jingting and I can be considered to be fated. If Taoist Jingting can obtain that thing, I ask Taoist Jingting to share some with me." "Of course." Xiao Hua agreed without hesitation. "There is no need to doubt this." "Good." Taoist Jingting made a prompt decision. He cupped his hands and said, "If Taoist Jingting is willing, I will take Taoist Jingting there. However, that place is rather dangerous. The other fellow Taoists shouldn't rashly take risks." When the short nascent soul cultivator saw that Taoist Jingting had already said this, he hurriedly bowed and said, "I wish Taoist Jingting success. Farewell." After he finished speaking, he urged his magic power to leave. At this moment, he heard a very distant place, the location of that Yaodai mountain. Rumble. The sound of mountains and tsunamis reverberated through the entire sky. Xiao Hua and the others looked up and saw a blood-red meteor rushing out from the peak of Yaotai Mountain. It went straight to the top of the sky, and then with a large blood-red tail, it rushed from the top of the sky to the other end of the mountain range. As the meteor streaked across, the blood-red color was like a sharp sword cutting open the sky. A long bloody scar appeared in the sky. Not only that, but the sky before the meteor was extremely trembling. A myriad of multicolored lights burst out from the front of the meteor. After the meteor, that long red tail seemed to be overflowing with ripples, expanding the bloody scar to the extreme. The sky was filled with blood-red multicolored lights in an instant. Not only did they cover the clear sky, but they also covered the sun and the moon. That night and blood could be seen with the naked eye rushing towards Xiao Hua and the others from a distance. What is going on? The short nascent soul cultivator was shocked. His body, which had been flying away, came to a stop as he looked into the distance in shock. Strands of heaven and earth yuan qi, as well as streams of righteous qi, slowly surged into the sky. It was as if blood had fallen into a pool of water. The blood-colored rays of light were descending towards Yaodai Mountain at a speed visible to the naked eye. Rumble. The sound of thunder and claps of thunder seemed to be the only sound in the world, reverberating back and forth. Not only did the blood-colored meteor streak across the horizon, It even cut open the hearts of all the cultivators. An indescribable restlessness, viciousness, and brutality unknowingly diffused out from their hearts. A rare treasure? The short nascent soul cultivator had just stopped and his attention fell on the blood-colored meteor when he saw jade boxes flickering with brilliance and clouds rushing out from all directions. Behind the jade boxes were many cultivators. These cultivators were either activating their magic treasures or using their abilities. They were all extremely excited. Unfortunately, the majority of the jade boxes immediately disappeared into the blood-colored rays of light when they rushed into the air. Only a few landed in the hands of the cultivators. Those who obtained the jade boxes either turned around and flew away or directly rushed forward, disappearing with the other jade boxes. Those who didn't obtain the jade boxes naturally didn't want to fall behind. They immediately rushed into the blood-colored rays of light and disappeared. As for more cultivators, they were hesitant. After all, this blood-colored meteor was an ominous sign. Who knew what was inside the rays of light? However, wherever the meteor passed, the blood-colored scars didn't disappear. The rays of light spread downwards bit by bit without any intention of stopping. Some cultivators who were close to the rays of light didn't even need to move their bodies. Once they came into contact with the rays of light, they immediately disappeared. Seeing this, how could the cultivators not know that Star-Lord Palace's intention was to let all the cultivators enter the rays of light? Rather than waiting here to be sucked in by the rays of light, it was better to enter the rays of light now and obtain the rare treasure a step earlier. Thus, even more cultivators flew out from the continuous mountain range and rushed into the rays of light, disappearing without a trace. The short nascent soul cultivator looked at the treasures falling into the rays of light with greed in his eyes. Seeing that there were cultivators rushing into the rays of light, he immediately cupped his hands and said, "Taoist Master Xiao, I'll go first." "Please." Xiaohua nodded. That nascent soul cultivator urged his body and rushed up 100 feet. Once he came into contact with the blood-colored rays of light, he disappeared like the other cultivators. Xiaohua's divine sense followed. He only felt that the rays of light could isolate divine sense, but he couldn't see anything strange about it. "Fellow Taoists, hurry up and go," Xiaohua urged, then said to Taoist Master Jingting, "Fellow Taoist Jing, you can lead the way. From the looks of it, Star-Lord Palace wants to drive us to a place. The defensive formation from before might be closed." When Taoist Master Jingting heard this, he immediately understood. He hurriedly nodded and said, "Taoist Master, please follow me." As he said this, Taoist Master Jingting also urged his body and flew towards a place. The other nascent soul cultivators cupped their hands toward Xiaohua and also rushed into the rays of light somewhat hurriedly. They originally had some intention to go with Xiaohua, but when they saw that Xiaohua wanted to break through the formation again and didn't want them to follow, especially when all the rare treasures were sent into the blood-colored rays of light by Star-Lord Palace, all the cultivators on Yaotai Mountain had to enter the rays of light to obtain the rare treasures, so Xiaohua's role was weakened. Therefore, they also dispelled the idea of advancing and retreating with Xiaohua. Taoist Master Yuanqing looked at the nascent soul cultivator who flew away, his face unmoved. He calmly said to Xiaohua, "Taoist Master Xiao, Junior's cultivation is limited. I'm afraid it won't be easy for me to escape from Yaodai Mountain. I can't not follow you. You won't drive me away, right?" How is that possible?" Xiaohua laughed. His body flew up and rushed out after Taoist Master Jingting. He even said, "But if you want to follow us, don't call me senior in the future." Taoist Master Yuanqing laughed. His Taoist robe fluttered as he chased after Xiaohua. He also said, "Taoist Master Xiao, if you say so, how can I not follow your orders?" The three of them flew towards this place for about the time it took to eat a meal. Just as Xiaohua thought, the entire Yaodai Mountain was completely covered by the rays of light like volcanic clouds. Under the rays of light, rare treasures and spiritual objects flew out one after another. Not to mention that the defensive formation was gradually closing. Even if it wasn't, who would still stay here when the formation was empty? Zhenren Jingting saw them flying over several mountain ranges, flying and stopping. In the ancient forest, which was more than 100 feet high, they found a sandbar where 3 streams converged. Jinren Jingting stopped. He turned his head and narrowed his eyes to look at the multicolored light falling from above and behind him. He said, Jinren Shao, this is the place where the elites are. Although the rays of light will activate the defensive formation, it's 90% similar to the records I've obtained. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out. He saw that the vast qi above the sandbar was mixed with obscure inscriptions that blocked his divine sense. He knew this should be one of the defensive formations of Star-Lord Hall. He then looked at the lush ancient trees on the left side that blocked the blood-colored rays of light. If Taoist Master Jingting didn't bring him here, he probably wouldn't have found this place. So Xiaohua said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Jingting, before I came here, I also asked several fellow Taoists for advice. According to them, this Yaotai gathering is completely different from the previous one. There's nothing to learn from them. I wonder how fellow Taoist got the information about this place? Reverend Jingting looks at Xiaohua, then looks at Reverend Yuanqing, who is following behind him. He sighs and says, To tell you the truth, Reverend Xiao, I didn't get this information from anyone else. It was during the last few Yaotai gatherings that I came here by chance and found out. Xiaohua was surprised. Could it be that fellow Taoist Jingting has attended the Yaotai gathering many times? Not to mention Xiaohua, even Taoist Master Yuanqing looked at Taoist Master Jingting with interest. A bitter smile appeared on Taoist Master Jingting's face. He nodded and said, I'm not afraid of Taoist Master Zhao's joke. This is the 13th time I have attended the Yaotai gathering. Xiaohua didn't make a move, but Taoist Master Yuanqing cried out in surprise. However, after being surprised, Taoist Master Yuanqing became somewhat embarrassed. He said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Jing, you think too much. This Yaotai gathering is also the 3rd time I've attended. You've only attended a few more times than me. I'm afraid I'm the pot calling the kettle black. Alas. Taoist Master Jingting sighed. His voice was full of bitterness and helplessness. He looked at the sandbar in front of him and said, Fellow Taoists, please don't laugh at me. Actually, the purpose of this humble Taoist's visit to Yaotai Mountain is not for the treasures mentioned earlier. This humble Taoist is also not interested in the 3 treasures that Star-Lord Palace has taken out. This humble Taoist's purpose is the same as that of Taoist Xiao. Oh! Xiaohua raised his eyes to look at Taoist Master Jingting and asked curiously, Could it be? Fellow Taoist Jingting has attended the Yaotai gathering 12 times just for the Imperial Preceptor's lot? And 12 times, you actually didn't get it? Taoist Master Yuanqing was also surprised. After all, it wasn't particularly difficult to get the Imperial Preceptor's lot when one's cultivation had reached the middle nascent soul stage. As long as one's luck wasn't too bad, one could get it by attending the Yaotai gathering once. How could one be like Taoist Master Jingting, who had attended the Yaotai gathering 12 times and still hadn't gotten it? Taoist Master Jingting originally wanted to urge Xiaohua, but when he saw Xiaohua looking at him with great interest and seemed to have already released his divine sense, he knew that Xiaohua was observing the defensive formation in front of him. Thinking of his own decision, he opened his mouth and said, You're right, Taoist Master Xiao. Since I attended the first Yaotai gathering 400 years ago, I've attended the Yaotai gathering 12 times in the past several hundred years and returned empty-handed. I didn't get the Imperial Preceptor's lot even once. Fellow Taoist Jing, you really have perseverance. Taoist Master Yuanqing didn't know how to comfort Taoist Master Jingting, so he could only say this in a low voice. Actually, the first 3 times, I really did want to establish a country and have the ambition to be a country's teacher. Taoist Master Jingting said with a smile, but by the 4th time, the general who was on good terms with I was already old. Seeing that I couldn't help them establish a country for a long time, his son had already abandoned I and cooperated with others. I also met the fellow Taoist who helped them establish a country. I also met him at the Yaotai gathering. I can't help others, but of course, I can't disturb them. Therefore, the things that happened after that were just me acting in a fit of pique. I actually want to see how many times I can get the Imperial Preceptor's lot. Chapter 36:19. After Xiao Hua's divine sense landed on the defensive formation and carefully observed it for a moment, he unconsciously frowned slightly. This defensive formation was rather strange. It was like a lock covering the sandbar. The three streams rushing in from all directions were like keys to the lock. The defensive formation could only be opened by the streams. However, there was a faint strangeness in the streams, which contained a murderous intent. Xiao Hua felt that it was somewhat familiar, but also difficult to grasp. He had no choice but to think more about it. Fellow Taoist Jingting, how did you enter this place last time? Xiao Hua seemed to have a plan and asked. Reverend Jingting said without hesitation. When I participated in the Yaotai assembly for the first time, I had already obtained the Imperial Preceptor's lot on a mountain range not far from here. Unfortunately, before I could put it in my Qingquan bag, I was discovered by another fellow Taoist. This fellow Taoist was more powerful than me, so I was thrown into that stream. In order to escape that fellow Taoist's pursuit, I used the water escape technique to hide. Who knew that a very inexplicable force would bring me into that sandbar? It's just that I only entered the sandbar for a very short time. I was only able to see the situation inside before I was brought out. Later on, by chance and coincidence, I found out that inside was the Renjing that ordinary Taoist cultivators of my sect talked about. Alas, since I knew this thing was the Renjing, I had to come here every time I came here to take a look. However, apart from the first time, this was the only time I could see the surrounding ancient trees. In the past several hundred years, Star Lord Hall never opened this place. This time, I don't have much time left. Xiao Hua looked at the place that was only a few li away. The edges of the ancient trees were already blurred, as if the blood-red light had swallowed the ancient trees. Moreover, under the cover of the light, all the mountains, forests and streams could no longer be seen. Only the distant Yaotai Mountain stood tall like a pillar that reached the sky. Upon seeing this, Reverend Jingting straightened his clothes and bowed to Xiao Hua. Reverend Xiao, in fact, when I obtained the jade box containing the Imperial Preceptor's lot, I had a premonition in my heart that the jade box contained no other treasure but the Imperial Preceptor's lot. But Reverend Yuan Qing was somewhat puzzled. If you didn't have a premonition, why did you fight for it? Taoist Jingting said very meaningfully, I naturally fight for the State Preceptor's lot, but if I can't get it, then it's naturally not the State Preceptor's lot. However, Jinren Shao killed the Guardian Star and asked us to search for it. The only thing I could find was the Imperial Master's lot. Taoist Master Jingting's words were very awkward, but Taoist Master Yuan Qing also understood a little. Taoist Master Jingting's luck was extremely bad. This was his 13th time participating in the Yaotai assembly. The number of the Imperial Preceptor's lot was pitifully small. This was the first time he was so close to the Imperial Preceptor's lot, but he just happened to encounter the unstoppable Xiao Hua. Even if he could get the Imperial Teacher's lot in his hands, in the end he would have to give it to Xiao Hua. As Taoist Jingting spoke, his figure didn't get up. Since the heavens let me present the Imperial Preceptor's lot with both hands, then it's also letting me serve Taoist. I hope that Taoist Xiao can guide me when you establish your country in the future. Taoist Yuan Qing's eyebrows twitched as he forced a smile. He glanced at the silent Xiao Hua and said, Fellow Taoist Jingting, I'm afraid this isn't your true reason, is it? Yes, this is a reason, but it's not the most important one. Taoist Jingting didn't quite understand the relationship between Xiao Hua and Taoist Yuan Qing, but seeing that Xiao Hua didn't speak and only Taoist Yuan Qing spoke, he thought Xiao Hua didn't quite believe him. He hurriedly said, The most important thing is that I really don't have confidence in myself. I must rely on a senior with destiny. Taoist Xiao controls the national treasure of Confucian cultivators, so you're definitely a person with great destiny. If I don't rely on Taoist Xiao, who else can I rely on? Taoist Yuan Qing blinked his eyes and said with a smile, So that's how it is. I thought fellow Taoist was as afraid of death as I. Being afraid of death is naturally one of the reasons. Taoist Jingting said with a smile. Xiaohua looked at Taoist Jingting's bowing appearance and nodded. As early as when fellow Taoist Jingting gave me the jade box, I already promised you that I would take out something of equivalent value to the treasures inside the jade box to exchange with fellow Taoist. Since fellow Taoist wants to use his own future to exchange with me, I naturally feel ashamed to accept it. When Taoist Jingting heard this, his face was filled with ecstasy. He shouted, "State Preceptor, please accept this subordinate's bow." "Ha, fellow Taoist is too polite." Xiaohua raised his hand and helped Taoist Jingting up. "Since you want to work for me, I will certainly not treat fellow Taoist unfairly. As long as I can give you anything, I will satisfy fellow Taoist." Taoist Yuan Qing's face showed a trace of surprise. He also said with a smile, "Congratulations, Taoist Xiao." "Congratulations, fellow Taoist Jingting, huh?" Xiaohua was about to raise his head to answer when suddenly his eyebrows rose and he let out a cry of surprise. He immediately waved his hand and grabbed Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jingting out of thin air. Without waiting for the two to speak, he dragged the two of them and rushed to the nearby sandbar. Taoist Jingting and Taoist Yuan Qing were slightly stunned. However, when their divine senses swept over the sandbar, they saw that under the blood-red brilliance, near the upper wind of the second stream, an inexplicable aura rushed out. The originally disorderly inscriptions immediately swarmed up. That aura was like a sharp blade that cut open a flaw in the defensive formation. "There's someone inside." Taoist Jingting exclaimed in a low voice and looked at Taoist Yuan Qing. The two of them looked at each other with surprise. The inscriptions were like a fountain, and the noble spirit swarmed out. This noble spirit was like an incomparably sharp flying sword, and it slashed in the air with a whooshing sound. Strands of fine texture appeared in the void, and the white clouds were turned into nothingness by these fine texture. Xiaohua brought the two of them with him. His whole body flashed with a faint golden light. This golden light also made cracking sounds in the fine lines and shattered into pieces. However, the moment it shattered, the golden light condensed again. "Go!" Xiaohua landed in the middle of the inscriptions and waved his hand. A ray of brilliance appeared, like a huge fist crashing into the inscriptions. Boom! Thousands of inscriptions were forcibly suppressed. The place where the aura appeared was torn apart by this fist. The aura that rushed out became more and more violent. However, just as the aura rushed out, an ear-piercing beast roar was heard from within the crack. The aura suddenly converged, and even a kind of weakness and helplessness leaked out from the aura. "Demonic beast!" Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He made a hand seal to protect himself and the others. As his body crashed into the crack, his divine sense rushed inside. "Oh, this is somewhat interesting." Xiaohua landed in the defensive formation. His divine sense had already seen the situation inside the formation clearly. His face unconsciously revealed an expression of interest. He saw that this place was several acres in size. 3 streams rushed into the sandbar, dividing the sandbar into 3 parts. And the 3 streams converged at the center of the sandbar. A layer of watery splendor rushed out from the center of the sandbar, covering a part of the sandbar. Moreover, with Xiaohua's divine sense, he had already sensed the mana fluctuations of this splendor. What was covering a part of the sandbar was actually a Taoist magic array. Looking above the sandbar, the aura that rushed out of the defensive formation came from a demonic beast that was several tens of meters in size. This demonic beast had long ears, blood-red eyes, and a 3-petaled mouth. It was very similar to an ordinary rabbit. However, this demonic beast's fur was brownish-red, and its tail was several tens of meters long. How could a rabbit compare to the bloodthirst in its eyes and the vicious aura on its huge demonic body? Below the demonic beast's body, 2 forelimbs that were like human arms were currently covered in a scarlet ring of fire. This ring of fire burned with flames that were several feet high, roasting the demonic beast's forelimbs black. A pungent smell pervaded the air. Not only that, but above the demonic beast's head, a 3-pronged trident that was more than a foot long was emitting a 3-colored brilliance that firmly covered the demonic beast's head. The demonic beast's thunderous roars could not be heard. In front of the demonic beast, there were several nascent soul cultivators who were flying in a circle in midair. The three at the front were forming hand seals and activating their magic treasures. The four at the left were holding magic treasures in their hands and coldly looking at a female cultivator wearing dark reddish-purple clothes behind the demonic beast. Xiaohua brought Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jing Ting into the defensive formation. The seven of them were immediately alerted. However, when everyone scanned them with their divine senses, they saw that the three people activating their magic treasures were not alarmed at all. It was as if they had just seen a passerby. On the other hand, the other two people were surprised but also had a trace of ridicule. Xiaohua also knew these two people. Weren't they the two cultivators that Xiaohua had met on the night before he entered Mount Yaotai and participated in the trade fair? One was Taoist Shifan, and the other was Taoist Chu. This was what they meant by, enemies are bound to meet. Xiaohua could clearly see the two people's ridicule. His heart was unconsciously moved and he looked towards the formation below him. As for Taoist Jing Ting, as soon as he entered the defensive formation, he was immediately attracted by the rabbit-like demonic beast. His gaze had already fallen on the female cultivator wearing dark reddish-purple clothes. He saw that this tall female cultivator looked to be in her 20s. The purple clothes she wore accentuated her curves. The woman's appearance was elegant and she had an oval face with a small nose that was slightly raised. Her most attractive feature was her pair of eyes. The woman's eyes weren't large and were apricot-shaped. Under her thin eyelids, her flowing gaze was like water ripples. The woman's gaze swept past Xiaohua and the others. Immediately, a kind of faint sadness emerged in everyone's hearts. This sadness seemed to be a reflection of the female cultivator's unfortunate life, but it also seemed to be a kind of pity for the female cultivator. Because at this moment, the woman's face was pale and flushed. Obviously, she was injured. On top of the woman's head, a simple and unadorned jade pendant emitted a misty brilliance that firmly enveloped the woman. However, this brilliance was as thin as paper. It seemed that any random magic treasure could break through the woman's defensive magic treasure. Oh! Seeing that another person had rushed into the defensive formation, the demonic beast opened its mouth and roared. Its body struggled with all its might and a kind of dense demonic fog sprayed out from its mouth. However, under the confinement of the trident, that dense fog couldn't reach very far. Even the demonic beast's twisting body overflowed with runes. These runes were like ropes that trapped the demonic beast. Chapter 3620. Oh, fellow Taoist Jingting, could it be, you know this female cultivator? Xiaohua withdrew his gaze from the formation and turned to look at Master Taoist Jingting, asking in a low voice. When Master Taoist Jingting heard this, he hastily said, reporting to Master Taoist, I do know this female cultivator. Didn't I tell you before? I've been here many times in the past 400 years, and I've met this female cultivator twice. Her name is Li Jing, and her Taoist name is Fairy Jing. Xiaohua looked at Master Taoist Jingting with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, it seems this Fairy Jing has the same idea as fellow Taoist Jingting. It seems so. Master Taoist Jingting looked at Fairy Jing's struggling appearance and sighed. Although we didn't have a deep conversation on those two occasions, I already sensed it. Before entering Yaotai Mountain this time, I specifically looked for her but didn't see any trace of her. I didn't expect her luck to be better than mine. Master Taoist Yuanqing said in a low voice, Master Taoist Xiao, these 7 cultivators are all mid-nascent soul stage. For that Fairy Jing to be able to confront them, her cultivation isn't low. Right now, the two sides are in a deadlock. If Master Taoist wants to help, then we'll immediately take action. Otherwise, we'll head into the formation to look for her. Master Taoist Jingting said with a bitter smile, that Renjing can only be obtained one at a time. If Fairy Jing obtains it, I'm afraid we'll have to return empty-handed. When Xiaohua heard this, he faintly smiled and said with deep meaning, that's right. Since we've already arrived late, it's better to wait and see. Although Xiaohua's plan was well thought out, Fairy Jing's summon immediately shattered his plans. Seeing Master Taoist Jingting whispering to Xiaohua and the others, Fairy Jing's eyes rippled like water. She said, "Master Taoist Jingting, you've also come?" Master Taoist Jingting's expression changed. If it was before, he would definitely fly into a rage. After all, Fairy Jing's words, whether intentional or not, had dragged him into the vortex. But fortunately his anger only swept away for a moment, and he immediately calmed down. Beside him was Taoist Xiao, who was a 5th grade origin power. Why should he care about the petty thoughts of others? Taoist Jingting was calm and didn't agree. The 7 cultivators surrounding him had a plan in their hearts. Everyone exchanged glances and transmitted a few words. Taoist Shifan and Taoist Chu Feng flew out. Taoist Shifan was still able to cup his hands in salute, but Taoist Chu Feng unexpectedly didn't even need to salute. He opened his mouth and said, "Xiaohua, we've already come here first. The spiritual items here are also things we want. As the proverb says, a gentleman doesn't seize another's good things. I presume that a gentleman like Taoist, who has a graceful bearing, surely won't lower himself to the level of common people like us, right?" Hee hee. Xiaohua laughed. He laughed so hard that his eyes narrowed. He pointed at Fairy Jing and said, "The ancients have a saying that good men don't fight with women. You 7 big men actually besieged a female cultivator. Where are the manners of men?" Seeing that Xiaohua didn't attack, Master Taoist Chu sneered in his heart, but he still said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao is wrong. Didn't you see this demonic beast? Although this woman is a Taoist cultivator, she actually raised demonic beasts and wallowed in evil with the 1,000 demonic Saint Realm demonic beasts. Where is the dignity of a Taoist cultivator? As Taoist cultivators, we naturally have the obligation to help this lost lamb return to the right path." Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jing Ting were very astonished. The 2 of them didn't quite understand the meaning of Master Taoist Chu Feng's words, but seeing that Xiaohua didn't move, the 2 of them simply ignored him. Master Taoist Chu Feng saw that Xiaohua and the others were only standing in the air, and he was pleased with himself. Xiaohua's gaze swept over the formation and he nodded again. "Fellow Taoist's words are very reasonable. Since that's the case, I won't disturb you guys from upholding justice for our Taoist sect. Farewell." "Yes, fellow Taoist Xiao, please." Master Taoist Chu Feng raised his brows and became even more pleased. He raised his hand and gestured with a somewhat strange tone. Xiaohua pretended to turn around, but he suddenly opened his mouth again. "That's right, I heard that there's a strange treasure of Star-Lord Hall here. As the proverb says, treasures have no owner and only the virtuous can obtain them. I'll go take a look. I won't disturb you, will I?" No, fellow Taoist Xiao, please." Master Taoist Chu Feng laughed until his stomach hurt. Beside him, Master Shifan also resisted the urge to laugh. They really didn't expect Xiaohua to leave just like that. Of course, it couldn't be said that they didn't think about it, but they didn't dare to believe it. "Alright." Xiaohua turned around with a smile, but just as his figure moved, he clapped his hand again. A gust of wind whistled and golden light gushed out from the top of his head. It transformed into a palm that was tens of meters long and grabbed at the air. He even said coldly, "Brat, one is a traitor and the other is a strong-willed person. What qualifications do you have to speak to me? Now that everyone is besieging an orphan girl, you actually speak with conviction. If I don't kill you today, when will I?" "Ah?" Master Taoist Chu Feng was really shocked. Although he was on guard before, he gradually let his guard down after seeing Xiaohua being persuaded. However, he didn't expect Xiaohua to immediately turn hostile as soon as he turned around. How was this still the pedantic cultivator in his heart? Spiritual Master Shifan was also caught off guard. By the time the 2 of them hurriedly formed hand seals and 2 rays of light rushed into the air to block Xiaohua, the large hand had already grabbed down. The space within a radius of several hundred feet was controlled by Xiaohua. The 2 hand seals rushed out like little loaches. They struggled in the air with all their might and were unable to move. Not only that, but when Xiaohua's large hand grabbed down, The trident that had previously imprisoned the demonic beast immediately lost its brilliance and fell down. The rabbit-like demonic beast raised its head and cried out loudly. A dense demonic aura immediately gushed out and rushed toward the three people in front of it. At the same time, there were crackling sounds like beans being fried. One by one, jumping runes fell from the demonic beast's body. Ah! Seeing this, Fairy Jing was also stunned. However, the joy in her heart far surpassed the shock. After all, Xiaohua was standing in front of Master Taoist Jingting. She didn't dare to climb up to Xiaohua and could only probe Master Taoist Jingting. Unfortunately, Master Taoist Jingting didn't even pay attention to her. Clearly, he was following Xiaohua's lead. She then looked at Xiaohua again. Unexpectedly, he was locked in by Master Taoist Chu's words and wanted to leave after a few words. Fortunately, this Fairy Jing wasn't a scheming person. She didn't play any tricks and only used her own magic power to bitterly support herself. But at this critical moment, there was a sudden turn of events and Xiaohua suddenly attacked. However, the power of Xiaohua's palm was really too fierce. Fairy Jing pointed at the jade pendant above her head. The jade pendant struggled to emit a brilliance, wanting to attack the somewhat difficult opponent. However, the jade pendant in Xiaohua's hand seemed to have sunk into a quagmire. Not only was it difficult to send out magic power, but the jade pendant itself was also difficult to move. This Master Taoist Xiao, what is his cultivation? Fairy Jing glanced at Xiaohua with great fear. Kacha! Several crisp sounds rang out. Not only did the demonic beast break free from its shackles, but the rings on its front claws also fell off. The three attacking cultivators couldn't help but retreat a few dozen feet from the shock. It was also at this time that a fiery voice came from the array not far below them. Which bastard actually dares to break this old man's forbidden technique? Along with the voice, a black dot appeared at the center of the spell formation. The black dot quickly expanded into a vortex and a cultivator wearing black armor charged out from the vortex. A divine sense comparable to a late-stage nascent soul cultivators angrily swept toward them. Behind the black battle armor, several cultivators activated their own magic treasures and followed after him. Not only that, but several popping sounds rang out as tricolored bubbles also appeared on the other two parts of the formation on the sand island. Two bursts of spiritual sense that were no less powerful than the suit of black armor also swept forth from the spots where the bubbles ruptured. One of the divine senses fell on Xiaohua and paused for a moment. Soon after, a crimson fist flickered with dark flames and smashed toward Xiaohua without any explanation. As the fist moved, the previously angry cultivator waved his hand. Countless amounts of world yuan qi followed his gesture and condensed into a large hand. This large hand had faint black threads floating within it and whistled toward Xiaohua. As for the third nascent soul cultivator, he seemed to be somewhat hesitant. However, as the two large hands fell, he could only point with his finger. A cloud flew out of his hand and a foot-long horsetail whisk fell from the sky. Ha! Xiaohua laughed. So, it's an old acquaintance. Hua de Zhenren, did you not learn your lesson at the banquet? As Xiaohua spoke, he flew out and activated his Fa Li. His palm, which was originally a feint, immediately changed. It flipped over like it could overturn mountains and seas, then suddenly expanded. It was like a real giant hand that flashed with golden light as it slammed towards Hua de Zhenren's giant hand. Rumble! Xiaohua's big hand fell down and collided with the other two. The entire sky exploded with a powerful qi wave. The scarlet fist along with the dark flame was completely extinguished by Xiaohua's attack. That blackened big hand was already imprisoned by Xiaohua's magic power halfway. Only a faint black thread spread out like a small snake and retreated with extreme vigilance. There was also the horsetail whisk in the cloud. When the cloud was struck down by Xiaohua, the entire horsetail whisk slightly swayed. Thousands of golden rays of light shattered Xiaohua's little finger. Damn it! The black-armored cultivator angrily cursed and his expression changed. He slapped his hand and a foot-long iron spike appeared in his hand. He was going to use his magic power in this fierce wind. You dare! Suddenly, Xiaohua let out an angry roar. The figure that had already landed in front of Taoist Huada suddenly flashed with lightning and retreated like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, he rubbed his hands together and countless tiny lights fell into the void. Bang bang bang. Following the collision of the hands of the three nascent soul cultivators, the sound of air breaking rang in everyone's ears. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Another violent sound rang out and the entire defensive formation shook. However, the center of the shaking was not between the four nascent soul cultivators, but where Xiao Hua just left. Chapter 36:21. Xiao Hua was furious. He hurriedly activated the lightning escape technique and charged toward the center of the explosion at lightning speed. Moreover, countless golden threads flickered in front of him where the lightning had exploded. It was the technique Xiao Hua had activated earlier. However, these golden threads were somewhat disorderly from the impact of the explosion and couldn't fall down for a long time. Only after the most powerful wave of the explosion had subsided did the golden threads disappear. Looking at the sky again, the rabbit-like demonic beast had been blasted hundreds of meters into the air. Its two ears were swaying weakly and its scarlet eyes flickered with an expression of lingering fear. Fairy Jing, who was on the demonic beast, was also deathly pale. She looked ahead regretfully. As for the four nascent soul cultivators who were attacking Fairy Jing, they had long since flown away. All of them were watching the scene with schadenfreude. In the air, Taoist Chu Feng and Taoist Shi Fan were surrounded by flickering golden threads. Taoist Chu Feng's face was as white as a sheet of paper. Taoist Shi Fan's eyes were filled with innocence. He wanted to open his mouth to explain, but Xiao Hua was furious and couldn't even open his mouth. As for Taoist Yuan Qing, he was standing hundreds of meters away from the two. Half of his Taoist robe was torn and his face was dark red. His eyes were filled with a look of someone who had just escaped from death. His gaze was still fixed on the place where he had tried his best to escape. There, the unfortunate Taoist Jing Ting had already disappeared. Not to mention a corpse, not even a drop of blood could be seen. No one saw it more clearly than Taoist Yuan Qing. Just as Xiao Hua retracted his hand and fled to attack the three late nascent soul cultivators, Taoist Chu Feng, who had escaped from Xiao Hua's imprisonment, suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a several-inch-long rhombus-shaped object. Taoist Yuan Qing immediately felt fear and trepidation as soon as that object appeared. Immediately afterward, a rumbling sound erupted from Xiao Hua's location. Taoist Yuan Qing immediately moved to attack Taoist Chu Feng, but he was still a bit too slow. Taoist Chu Feng frantically shook his hand and half of his arm turned into blood that rushed into the rhombus-shaped object. The object immediately trembled and disappeared before Taoist Yuan Qing's eyes. How could Taoist Yuan Qing not know how powerful this object was? He hurriedly fled. Taoist Jing Ting's cultivation couldn't compare to Taoist Yuan Qing's, and his scheming was even more difficult to compare. Only after Taoist Yuan Qing fled did Taoist Jing Ting come to his senses. By the time he hurriedly brought out the heaven-shaking hammer, the rhombus-shaped object had already appeared in front of his chest. Bang bang! The sound of air currents was the sound of the rhombus-shaped object breaking through Taoist Jing Ting's protective qi. Then, the rhombus-shaped object exploded loudly and Taoist Jing Ting's corpse was blown to smithereens. Even though Taoist Yuan Qing reacted quickly, he was still injured by this object. Not only was half of his body unable to move, but the qi and blood in his body were constantly surging and difficult to calm down. What is this thing? Why is it so powerful? It can even kill a mid-nascent soul cultivator? Taoist Yuan Qing thought to himself with lingering fear. I'm afraid it's a destructive magic weapon specially refined by an expert related to Taoist Chu. While Taoist Yuan Qing was pondering, Xiao Hua's figure had already appeared where Taoist Jing Ting was standing just a moment ago. Xiao Hua merely swept over with his divine sense before he had time to look elsewhere. He heard Taoist Huada sneer behind him. "You dare!" Then he saw Taoist Huada clap his hands and a fist-sized fire gourd flew into the air. A ferocious aura that seemed capable of destroying heaven and earth rushed out of the gourd's mouth. Damn it! Xiao Hua cursed, unable to restrain his anger. This matter couldn't be considered as his carelessness. He saw that Fairy Jing was able to confront 3 nascent soul cultivators by relying on her demonic beast and magic weapon. He only needed to break the confinement spell on the demonic beast. Then he had Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jing Ting on his side. 3 nascent soul cultivators and 1 demonic beast dealing with 7 nascent soul cultivators shouldn't be a problem. And when he saw the confinement spell on the demonic beast, he knew that there were definitely other powerful nascent soul cultivators within the array. Therefore, he broke the spell and lured them out. But Xiaohua didn't expect Taoist Chu to actually have such a powerful magic weapon. This item was similar to the single-use magic weapon Xiaohua refined when he was still a low-level cultivator. Moreover, this item was 100 times more powerful than Xiaohua's. In particular, the lamentable Taoist Jing Ting was extremely unlucky. Taoist Yuan Qin was able to dodge it, but Taoist Jing Ting actually didn't react at all and was killed. Perhaps Xiaohua would avenge Taoist Yuan Qin's death, but Taoist Jing Ting's death was something Xiaohua must avenge. Xiaohua simply ignored Taoist Huada's sneak attack from behind. His eyes were burning with anger as he stretched out his hand. A large illusory hand grabbed Taoist Chu and Taoist Shifan. These 2 were nascent soul cultivators, but under Xiaohua's fury, they couldn't resist at all. Now, they were like infants in Xiaohua's hands. The 2 revealed fear in their eyes. They did their best to open their mouths as if calling for help from Taoist Huada. But before Taoist Huada's magic weapon could fly out, 2 consecutive sounds rang out. The bodies of the 2 nascent soul cultivators were crushed into meat paste amidst a burst of light. Save me, save me! Following the bloody light, 2 5-foot-long nascent souls clad in armor rushed out from the meat paste. Unfortunately, the 2 nascent souls were still flashing with golden threads at this time. Xiaohua's confinement technique didn't only imprison their bodies, it also sealed their nascent souls. Boom! As soon as the 2 nascent souls came out, they immediately produced a vast chi pillar. Layers of dense fog soared into the sky and wrapped around the nascent souls in Xiaohua's hands. Humph! Xiaohua sneered. He opened his already prepared left hand and the sword gourd appeared. The thing with a nose and eyes on the gourd rushed out and immediately nailed Taoist Chu's nascent soul. Swoosh swoosh! The spirit-slaying origin light flew out and turned slightly. Taoist Chu's nascent soul's head didn't fall off, but its eyes lost their spirit and the brilliance around its body was immediately extinguished. Save me, save me! Taoist Shifan's nascent soul hurriedly cried out. Taoist Xiao, this junior didn't? Shut up! Xiaohua roared and pointed at the sword gourd. The spirit-slaying origin light from the sword gourd went past Taoist Shifan and rushed towards Taoist Huada. However, a scarlet flame also flew out from Taoist Huada's fire gourd and pierced towards Xiaohua with incomparable speed. Crackle crackle! There was another violent explosion. Hundreds of sparks splashed out from the spirit-slaying origin light and the scarlet flame. Circles of ripples rippled through the air. The group of cultivators who were originally standing behind Taoist Huada were greatly shocked and hurriedly retreated. Humph! Xiaohua snorted coldly. He looked at Taoist Shifan in his hands and said coldly, Taoist Chu is domineering and you actually fan the flames. If he doesn't have the Tao in his heart, how can you have the Tao? Although I didn't have the intention to kill you before, I can't do anything about your repeated provocations. I had no choice but to take action. As for you, losing your physical body is also a punishment. I won't let my hands be stained with blood again. Many thanks, Taoist. Many thanks, Taoist. Taoist Shifan's nascent soul's sharp voice was filled with pleasant surprise. However, when Xiaohua loosened his hand and put away the Qingkuan pouch in his hands, a huge suction force with an overwhelming aura pressed down. Taoist Shifan's nascent soul was simply unable to control his body and fell down along with the mist. Taoist, save me! Taoist Shifan's nascent soul turned pale with fright and hurriedly cried out. Unfortunately, just as his voice sounded, Xiaohua's illusory hand collapsed. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua couldn't resist under the intentional arrangement of Star Lord Hall. Xiaohua looked indifferently at the place where Taoist Shifan slowly disappeared and shook his head slightly. It's not that I don't want to save you, it's because I'm powerless to save you. With that, Xiaohua raised his head and looked at Taoist Huada with a gaze like lightning. He smiled and said, although I'm powerless to save you, I can send someone to accompany you. Xiaohua was furious, and he hated Taoist Huada in his heart. He rubbed his hands together, and golden threads entered the void again. Within a radius of 30 meters around Taoist Huada, the strange force suddenly increased, as if several earth-shattering waves were smashing down. Taoist Huada was shocked. He never thought that Xiaohua would actually have the strength to cast a spell while activating the sword gourd. His heart was in a mess, and the scarlet-red fire threads were already unable to block the soul execution light. Pa, like a sword-piercing bamboo, the fire threads collapsed inch by inch, and the soul execution light followed the fire threads and rushed towards Taoist Huada. Fellow Shui Ming, help me! Taoist Huada's face changed as he shouted loudly. The cultivator holding the horsetail whisk beside Taoist Huada was helpless. He raised his hand and was about to wave the horsetail whisk. At this time, Xiaohua's cold voice sounded, "This Xiao is in a bad mood right now. It's best if you don't make a move. Otherwise, this Xiao can't guarantee that this Xiao won't kill all of you, arrogant." Without waiting for the nascent soul cultivator named Shui Ming to make a move, the black-armored cultivator next to him roared. The small halberd in his hand flew out like a dragon and attacked Xiaohua. Fight! Xiaohua raised his hand and the seal of turning the sea rushed out of the space. The coiling dragon roared as it urged the seal to fall down like a mountain. Under the bronze brilliance, a terrifying aura condensed. Under this aura, the black-armored cultivator's small halberd no longer had the appearance of a dragon and was pressed down by more than a few feet. Go! When the cultivator Shui Ming saw this, his face changed slightly. He didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly urged the horsetail whisk. But just as the three of them were about to fight, they suddenly heard Fairy Jing cry out involuntarily, "Jing? Fellow Taoist Jing Ting?" Xiaohua was stunned. He hurriedly scanned with his divine sense and saw a small nascent soul flickering with a faint brilliance at the edge of the formation in the distance. Looking at the nascent soul shaking its head, it seemed to be somewhat unstable. Seeing this scene, Xiaohua immediately understood. Although Taoist Master Chu's magic treasure had shattered Taoist Jing Ting's physical body, Taoist Jing Ting's luck hadn't declined to the extreme. His nascent soul had actually escaped. It was just that the nascent soul had been knocked unconscious by the huge impact and had just woken up. Chapter 36-22. Xiaohua was delighted, but he immediately shouted, "Be careful, Taoist Jingting." With that, Xiaohua ignored the other three late nascent soul stage cultivators and flew towards Taoist Jingting's nascent soul. Moreover, his divine sense displayed the magical power that he had just comprehended from the secret technique of Do Shanjun's jade pupil. It turned into an invisible big hand that stretched out, wanting to protect Taoist Jingting. Seeing Xiaohua so easily escape from the battle and treat the three of them as nothing, Taoist Huada couldn't help but bite his lips and his eyes flashed with an ominous glint. Shua! Just as Taoist Huada wanted to make a move, thousands of blood-colored rays of light fell from the top of the defensive formation and quickly covered the four cultivators who had previously besieged Fairy Jing. The four cultivators couldn't struggle at all and immediately disappeared into the rays of light. Forget it! Taoist Huada looked at Xiaohua's sword gourd floating in the air and the condensed soul-slaying origin light. He smiled coldly and looked at the black-armored cultivator. The two nodded slightly and their figures shot into the sky and also disappeared. Alas! The cultivator Shui Ming seemed to want to wait for a while, but the rays of light hit his face and a huge force that even a late nascent soul stage cultivator couldn't resist came. He couldn't help but rush into the rays of light. Looking at Xiaohua again, he didn't dare to use his magic power to disturb the defensive formation of Star-Lord Hall. He only dared to use the divine ability he had just comprehended and never used. However, he was still too late. Without waiting for the hand formed by his spiritual sense to fall, A thick fog suddenly rose and a pillar of vast qi came crashing down. Taoist Jingting's nascent soul hadn't woken up yet and was sucked into it in a moment. The nascent soul only had time to scream before it disappeared. Boom! The nascent soul had just disappeared, but the thick fog didn't dissipate. The vast qi pillar seemed to have been hit by a huge fist and broke into two with a boom. After the wind whistled, Xiaohua's figure appeared there with a very angry and regretful expression on his face. Staring at the place where Taoist Master Jingting's nascent soul disappeared, Xiaohua's brows furrowed tightly. He had already seen this kind of strange situation before, but he didn't notice anything strange at all, so it was impossible for him to see anything strange now. If he had never seen Xianzongzi, perhaps he would be like ordinary cultivators and think that Star-Lord Hall was protecting the Taoist cultivators. He would wait until the Yaotai meeting to find Zhenren Jingting. However, Xianzongzi's Yuanying and the two Yuanying whose primordial spirits were erased reminded him that the Confucian cultivators would not kill the physical bodies of these three Yuanying cultivators for no reason. If the emperor of a country had such an intention, Star-Lord Hall would have even more. Of course, even if this was really a method used by the Star-Lord Hall to protect their nascent souls, Xiaohua still had to get to the bottom of it. He had to kill the nascent souls of Reverend Chu and Reverend Shunkin. He absolutely couldn't let them escape. Taoist Master? Just as Xiaohua was pondering, a timid voice came from not far away. It was Fairy Jing who had collected her demon beast and flew over. Yes. Xiaohua's gaze swept over Fairy Jing. He nodded slightly with an indifferent expression on his face. Fairy Jing reached into her bosom and took out a jade box. She handed it over respectfully and said in a low voice, "This is the Renjing I obtained from the Shazhou's formation. Senior must have come for it. I caused Taoist Jingting's death and also received Taoist Master's help. I have nothing to repay you with." Yes, Xiaohua declined to comment. He beckoned with his hand and the jade box fell into his hand. Looking at the restrictions and talismans covering the box, Xiaohua opened his mouth and a beam of sword light fell. All the restrictions were broken. Fairy Jing's heart skipped a beat as she saw this. She secretly rejoiced at her own actions. Contrary to Fairy Jing's expectations, Xiaohua opened the jade box and saw the so-called Renjing inside. An expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. He then raised his head and asked, "Li Jing, are you sure this is the Renjing of the heavenly soul, earthly soul and Renjing? What? Could it be that this isn't a Renjing?" Fairy Jing was also stunned. Looking at the spirit fruit that looked like half a gourd, she asked curiously, "This Renjing is thin at the top and thick at the bottom. Isn't it a nurturing essence? If this isn't a Renjing, then what is it?" Hearing Fairy Jing's words, Xiaohua was slightly absent-minded. It seemed that a long time ago, there was a woman called Kai Zhuoxia who said to him, "Taoist Xiao, look. That mother-child spirit fruit is thin at the top and thick at the bottom. Isn't it a nurturing infant? That's why it's called mother-child spirit fruit." Taoist Xiao. At this moment, Taoist Master Yuan Qing transmitted his voice from the distant sky. The defensive formation is about to be sealed by Star-Lord Hall. Taoist Xiao should quickly follow this multicolored light out of the defensive formation. Hearing this, Xiaohua looked up. Sure enough, there was no one else in the sky except for Taoist Master Yuan Qing. The blood-red multicolored light had already filled the sky and was about to approach Taoist Master Yuan Qing. "Taoist Master Yuan Qing, you go first. I'll be right there." Xiaohua thoughtfully glanced at Taoist Master Yuan Qing. After thinking for a moment, he transmitted his voice again. Taoist Master Yuan Qing naturally knew that Xiaohua needed this Renjing, so he didn't delay any longer. His figure flew up and disappeared into the multicolored light. "Taoist Xiao," Fairy Jing said with a smile, "ever since I saw this item in the San Province, I've been looking for ancient records. Finally, I found the source. The records in the ancient records are exactly the same as this item. There should be no mistake." "What do you want this item for?" Xiaohua looked at Fairy Jing with narrowed eyes and asked very abruptly. A trace of sorrow appeared on Fairy Jing's face. but it was instantly washed away by the water-like mist. She said in a low voice, "This is my secret. I hope Taoist Xiao can understand." Xiao Hua nodded and extended his hand. "Give me the jade eye that records how to use this item." This. Fairy Jing was somewhat hesitant, but after a moment of hesitation, she obediently handed over a black cloud eye to Xiao Hua. "I want this black cloud eye. Presumably, you've already made a copy of the records inside." Xiao Hua took the black cloud eye and closed the jade box. He threw it to Fairy Jing and said, "I have no use for this item. You can keep it for yourself." Fairy Jing was truly overjoyed. She took the jade box with some disbelief. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "Don't be in a daze. Hurry up and go. If you're stopped by Taoist Master Huada and the others, you can say that I took the Ren Jing." "Many thanks, Taoist Xiao." Fairy Jing was even more delighted. She quickly received the jade box and bowed. Xiao Hua waved his hand and suddenly asked, "Right, what's the name of your demonic beast?" Fairy Jing was taken aback. She didn't dare to hide anything and hastily replied, "Its name is Inghua." Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. What a fierce name. No wonder its aura is so fierce. Fairy Jing looked at the light above her head and clapped her hand. She took out a jade slip and gave it to Xiao Hua. She said, "Taoist Xiao, this is where Junior's cave is located. Junior's strength can't compare to Taoist Zhao's, but I'm in charge of a small country close to the coast. There are often cultivators and Confucian scholars hunting the demons that escape from the Thousand Demons sacred realm. If Senior is interested in demonic beasts, Junior will welcome you." But Xiao Hua smiled and took the jade slip. He waved his sleeve and said, "You should go as well." Yes, Fairy Jing didn't know why Xiao Hua didn't leave, but she didn't dare to ask. She flew into the light. After Fairy Jing left, Xiao Hua said, "Green-robed Taoist, did you notice something?" A voice came from above Xiao Hua's head. It was the formless nascent soul controlled by green-robed Xiao Hua. "Let me tell you, fellow Taoist, when I control our nascent souls and leave our bodies, there will be a faint suction force. It's as if a ferocious tiger is watching us from afar. I can sense it. As long as I control my nascent soul to leave your body, the suction force will reveal its teeth at any time. As fellow Taoist already saw, this suction force isn't something you and I can deal with right now." Green-robed Xiao Hua's voice was a bit distant. He seemed to be thinking about something. "However, although this suction force is powerful, my nascent soul and my body are protected by the power of heaven and earth. This protection is the fundamental reason why the suction force can't appear." Hiss! Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the increasingly diffusing blood-red light. He said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, we don't have much time. Do you have any ability to help I rescue Taoist Jingting?" "No." Green-robed Xiao Hua answered decisively, "When I encountered this huge suction force and you and I saw the abnormality, I already started to investigate the secret technique." According to I's feeling and I's discussion with fellow Taoist Confucian, I feel that this is a huge defensive formation, but we can't be sure. At the same time, this defensive formation is definitely not something you and I can break with our current cultivation levels. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a trace of severity. He said again, "So, this is the work of Star-Lord Hall? The problem is..." Green-robed Xiao Hua sneered, "This Jade Pavilion gathering is the work of Star-Lord Hall. It's only logical that there is a defensive formation that can kill nascent soul cultivators." "That's right." Xiao Hua touched his chin with his hand and nodded slightly. "This is what the secular people say, Zhou Yu beats Huang Gai, one is willing to beat and the other is willing to suffer." "Zhou Yu? Huang Gai?" Green-robed Xiao Hua was stunned. "Who's this? Was it written in the books of Confucian cultivators? It's just a ruse of self-injury. There's no gimmick even if it's exposed." Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient. His thoughts turned rapidly. After all, it was his idea to come to the defensive formation in Shazhou. Moreover, when he saw that Renjing was a mother-child spirit fruit, he was extremely regretful. If he hadn't taken things for granted and didn't ask more questions, he would have known the truth about Renjing before entering the defensive formation. Then, Taoist Jingting might not have had to follow him to this defensive formation and Taoist Jingting might not have fallen. Especially since Taoist Jingting had already pledged allegiance to Xiaohua and placed his future on Xiaohua. He even entrusted his safety at the Jade Pavilion gathering to Xiaohua. Moreover, if it weren't for his grudges with Taoist Chu, Taoist Jingting wouldn't have fallen. All kinds of intricate karma made Xiaohua feel that he couldn't not save Taoist Jingting's nascent soul. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.